Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, Madame le greffier.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier. Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Brelade.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Madame le connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Grouville.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Sainte-Bonne.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Southern. Madame le député Labbé.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Tadier.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Luce.
Présent.
Madame le député Dublé. Monsieur le député Morel.
Présent.
Madame le député Lehegara. Monsieur le député Ayer.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Ward.
Présent.
Madame le député Alves.
Présente.
Madame le député Gardner. Monsieur le député Gorse.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Farnham.
Présent.
Madame le député Moore.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Mezet.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Ozef. Monsieur le député Balash.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Coles.
Présent.
Madame le député Poré. Monsieur le député Ward. Madame le député Miles.
Présente.
Madame le député Scott.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Renouf.
Présent.
Madame le député Curtis. Madame le député Faltham.
Présente.
Madame le député Binet. Madame le député Jeune. Madame le député Miller.
Présente.
Madame le député Howell.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Binet.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Ferry.
Présent.
Madame le député Kovac.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Curtis. Madame le député Ward.
Présente.
Madame le député Wilson.
Présente.
Madame le député Stevenson.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Andrews.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et les puissances de la terre pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir que les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, de la conduire tellement, toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toute leur délibération est accompagnée de ta bénédiction. Réussisse au bien-être et au jugement du peuple, qu'il te plut de commettre à leurs soins. Car nous t'en prions, au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous envoie point en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi est le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles.
Madame la connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Sir, the Connétable of Saint Laurent is dealing with a bereavement. May she be excused, please?
Do you wish her to be marked as excused?
Yes, please, sir.
Members agree the Connétable should be marked excused. Excusez.
Monsieur le député Southern.
Présent.
Madame le député Dublé.
Defo.
Monsieur le député Ozef.
Deputy Ozef, sir, apologies, is returning from a medical appointment. He should be in the Assembly shortly, so I'd ask that he's excused for the time being.
Members content to mark the deputy excused? Excusez. Les états sont constitués. On behalf of all members, I would like to welcome His Excellency, Lieutenant Governor, to the Chamber this morning. We now return to amendments to the government plan, and the Assembly is currently debating the amendment to the 25th Amendment, and I invite the next member to speak on this amendment.
Sir, just to say that at the end of the debate yesterday, I asked the Attorney General a question and he was going to give the answer in the state sitting this morning.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Attorney.
Yes, sir. Deputy Scott asked me if the Minister had powers to adjust transfers in a proposed government plan. Sarah, there are powers of the Minister to reallocate in relation to an approved government plan, and the primary power is in Article 18 of the Public Finance Law. And the Minister may direct that an amount appropriated under a government plan for one head of expenditure can be allocated to another head of expenditure, subject to provisos. There are two provisos. That other head of expenditure must be set out on the government plan, or be a new head of expenditure relating to a major project in the government plan. So there are controls over those powers, in that the Minister must give the states at least 4 weeks' notice of a proposal to give a direction under this article, and the Minister must also consult with any minister that may be affected by that proposed transfer. So there are two controls over that power. In addition, sir, there is a wider accountability provision in the Public Finance Law, in that under Article 23, the Minister must give a written statement setting out each function undertaken, which would include a transfer under Article 18 to the States Assembly on a semi-annual basis, so twice a year. Those are the two controls.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question, please, sir.
Yes.
So just following up, the Department for Economy's estimated expenditure in the government plan being 35.5 million, out of which it estimates giving grants and subsidies of over 25 million. If after performing its delayed value for money review of all the arm's length organisations to whom it gives grant funding, the department is able to save £324,000 out of this 35.5 million, which is the amount of its budget that the Economics and International Affairs panel proposes should be reduced, equating to less than 1% of its budget, can the department invest this sum into growing the economy in line with the common strategic policy, or does it have to hand the money over to the Treasury, please?
Could you answer that question, Mr. Taylor?
Sir, Deputy Scott did give me notice this morning of the question, so I have given it some thought. And so my view is that if a department has achieved efficiency savings, and that is accounted for in a government plan that is approved by the States Assembly, that simply means that that department has less budget for the year to spend. It doesn't mean that it is free to use the amounts saved on other areas of expenditure, effectively increasing its budget in the way that the Deputy suggested. So my answer, sir, is no, that the department would not be free to do that.
So does that mean that the amount saved therefore goes back to the Treasury for reallocation?
No, sir. I think the amount saved is simply that the budget, that the department has less budget for the year. It doesn't. It's not an amount that goes back to the Treasury. It's simply the department has less budget to spend for that particular year.
Thank you.
Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. The Health and Social Services Minister will speak about health-related concerns, but at the risk of sounding like the fun police again, I just wanted to remind members why, as Minister for Justice and Home Affairs, I do not support the freeze on alcohol duty. Once again, I deferred to ministerial colleagues to support a 4.5% increase, but I would prefer a reversion to the policy of an above RPI increase to constrain consumption and to compensate services. The negative effects of alcohol cost the emergency services tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds every year. Police time wasted dealing with drunken behaviour, ambulance call-outs to alcohol-related incidents, fire service to fires where people have fallen asleep after a good night out and left the cooker on. There is a cost to the courts, the probation service and the prison who pick up the pieces of lives broken by alcohol-related offending, either as a victim or an offender. Sir, this island is awash with alcohol. We're second only to Lithuania in the league table of per capita alcohol consumption. Alcohol consumption in Jersey was 12 litres of pure alcohol per adult. That's really not a statistic to be proud of. Alcohol was a contributory factor in nearly 20% of all crimes recorded in Jersey in 2022. And that doesn't include the process offences such as drunk and incapable, which are dealt with at Parish Hall. So the true level of alcohol-related offending is likely much, much higher. Alcohol was a factor in nearly a third of recorded assaults and nearly a quarter of nighttime economy offences committed in St Helier. The impact of alcohol and domestic abuse is also well documented, and women and girls are disproportionately negatively affected. The impact on children in families where disposable income is directed towards wine and beer rather than school shoes and after-school clubs is also well documented. Members who are familiar with the NSPCC and the work that Brighter Futures do will know all about that. The international evidence is robust and compelling. The link between increased price and lower consumption is proven time and time again. When faced with such strong evidence base about other subjects, people believe it. How to reduce disease, how to improve educational standards, etc. But it's really curious that when it comes to alcohol reduction and also obesity, people don't tend to believe it. They consider the evidence in relation to their own experience and not at a population level. Yesterday, we heard that the policies in place we have in Jersey to reduce consumption are flawed. We're only different to other communities in that we're nearly at the top of the leaderboard. And as I said previously, that is not something to be proud of. Knocking Lithuania off the top spot should not be our aim. We are no different to other communities. The international evidence applies to us equally. The good news is that the percentage of crimes in Jersey involving alcohol has trended downward from 23% in 2016 to 15% in 2022, which tends to suggest that pricing above RBI has had some positive effect. Increasing the price of alcohol does work to reduce consumption and therefore reduces alcohol-related crime and disorder. We heard a lot yesterday about duty rates and how that's going to affect the hospitality industry and how a freeze is necessary to support this sector. I'm a bit confused by this. Other jurisdictions are markedly more expensive. They have adapted to deliver a vibrant hospitality offer. If anybody's been to Iceland, alcohol is fiendishly expensive. £15 for a glass of wine, £20 for a pint. Downtown Reykjavik is buzzing. It has a thriving hospitality industry. Increasing the price of alcohol does work to reduce consumption. This island has an unhealthy obsession with alcohol that needs to be addressed. And like it or not, All the evidence suggests that increased price and reduced consumption leads to a more peaceful and law-abiding society. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Tadia.
Thank you, sir. So in these kind of debates, it can be tempting to take a polarised stance and say, I'm absolutely in favour and I want to support hospitality. I think the government is bad and they're using this stealth and indirect tax, consumption tax. And I'll say some of that, don't worry, I've not completely lost the plot. And on the other hand, say, an argument maybe like alcohol is bad, we need to tax it out, we need to stop drinking, and we need to be a society of teetotalers. And I think the reality is somewhere in the middle of that. And I think the first thing I'm going to do is ask for a call for honesty and looking not just at alcohol, but of the issues that maybe are partially being conflated here. So what we're saying is that alcohol duty directly will affect the viability of the hospitality industry. And I think there are lots of problems that need to be unravelled in that statement. If that's the basis on which the alcohol freeze and even the compromise, which we're talking about now, of course, I will speak to the amendment from government. The government's basically in this very strange position where they're not backing the Home Affairs Minister and they're not backing the Health Minister. So those two that last speech is largely irrelevant because government has already said, no, we're not doing that now. We're having a below inflation increase. It's about 5%. I don't know why the minister's shaking his head because that is the case. There's been a conversation that's taken place at Council of Ministers, and let's say half of the Council of Ministers have said, actually, we can't support this, we will vote against government and possibly defeat you on the alcohol freeze if you don't come forward with this. And therefore, that's politics. I'm not criticising anyone, and therefore we've got this amendment. And the problem is it doesn't do either thing now. So the argument to say we need to decrease alcohol duty for this vision of an alcohol-free society where everyone lives longer and people aren't going out and getting, getting into trouble. The first thing I would say, though, to the Home Affairs Minister is it's not alcohol per se that is causing an increased need for resources in the blue light emergency services. It's bad behaviour. Yeah, you can go out and stab somebody, punch somebody without drinking alcohol, and you can go out and drink alcohol and behave perfectly exemplary if you want to. And lots of people do that. So we can't simply say, and we often hear, in court, sir, you'll hear it all the time, about mitigation. The person wasn't in their right state of mind. They could be drinking alcohol, or they could have been taking illegal drugs. And I do ask the question, what do we do about illegal drugs? Do we is government going to increase the duty on illegal drugs? Because illegal drugs put a burden on our society. Illegal drugs break up families, and we see the consequences of that. But at the moment, government doesn't even tax 1 penny of those illegal drugs. So I think government needs to get its head round the wider problems of addiction, about people needing to find outlets. And so let's get back to this idea that by decreasing alcohol duty, it will automatically help hospitality. I don't think anyone's saying that outright, because that would probably be a slightly naive position to take. And I think the Economic Development Minister has already touched on this, is that there will be really difficult times for the hospitality industry, like many industries in Jersey over the next year and 2 years, due to a variety of factors, because of behavioural changes. Because let's face it, people have got less money in their pockets. And if you haven't got any money and you're spending all your money on high rents, you're in a really difficult situation if you live in the centre of St Helier in a cramped apartment, which you're paying perhaps a third or a half of your income, your disposable income on. And then you can't even have the ability to go out for a drink or two to a pub. You may even be somebody who doesn't drink alcohol, because there are people in our society, for whatever reason. Young people are turning away from alcohol in their droves, right? So this idea that we need to tax people out of drinking is not automatically true. Young people have taken the education advice that they get. They've seen that actually it's better to be fit than to drink lots of alcohol and to get fat or fatty liver. They like to go to the gym. They like to go out on walks, on runs. And so we have a much healthier generation than even my generation or ones that came before. So the idea that we can simply tax them out of drinking and that we need that as the stick doesn't follow, because they're already doing it without the tax. And they may be young people who are earning perfectly good salaries in Jersey as well. So I think we need to scotch that. What I would say, though, is that there's a shared problem between government and hospitality, in the sense that government is also addicted to alcohol duty. And so they predicate every budget on an automatic cost of living increase on duty, and then there's an argument about whether they should increase it above the rate of inflation for health and law and order reasons, which that's basically wearing thin. The other point I want to make at this juncture is the fact that there is a valid debate to have around alcohol policy. Scotland, for example, had a debate a few years ago, I think in the last couple of years, and they decided to introduce minimum unit pricing for alcohol. Jersey never had that debate. Does anyone remember having a debate about minimum unit pricing in Jersey? I've been here 15 years, I've never had that debate. But it's been introduced. So how did it get introduced in Jersey when we've never decided that that should be the policy? It got imposed on us by non-politicians. And I don't know the exact the word, but it's effectively the licensing bench, isn't it? So the judiciary in Jersey, and I mean no disrespect to them because the law gives them the right to do that. And as I know, they also have to deal with the consequences of excess alcohol consumption. But in the absence of politicians having a mechanism or the desire to bring forward a debate on happy hours and on minimum unit pricing and perhaps other mechanisms that we should be looking at, you know, who should sell alcohol? Should it be that you can buy alcohol? And when the Home Affairs Minister mentioned that alcohol in Iceland is very expensive, I was thinking you should go to Morrison's. Because the discrepancy that you get, and this is the other issue, isn't it? The discrepancy you get from supermarket to supermarket in Jersey, not just for alcohol, but for food, it can almost be the double. So, you know, this is a wider issue. Should it be that, you know, your petrol station shouldn't necessarily be able to sell you alcohol because your supermarket does sell you petrol, doesn't it? And so we need to have that debate about actually where alcohol is available, when it's available. I've said this before, is that, you know, alcohol is probably dangerous whenever you drink it in excess, right? And if you go into a shop, you can't buy alcohol at 11 o'clock in the evening, which is very strange, isn't it? Because you might have finished your shift at 10 o'clock. You might want to go into your local corner shop, which is still open because they're selling petrol and M&Ms and other things which are potentially bad for you, but we haven't taxed them yet. And you're thinking, I'd really love to just get a bottle of Tiska or a can of Carlsberg or a bottle of Jersey cider and have it so that I can watch some TV before I go to sleep about 2 o'clock in the morning, because I don't have to get up until 11 for my next day. My next shift starts at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But we're telling people they're not allowed to do that, but you can go and buy alcohol from 7 a.m. in the morning. So, and that's okay. So you can go into as soon as the shop's open, you can go and get your bottle of Buckfast, let's say, for want of a better word, and you can go and sit in the park with your brown paper bag next to the Don statue, and you can admire the Don statue. It's great. It's done by a Frenchman, ironically, celebrating a British general and governor in Jersey. And you can drink your bottle of alcohol all day, but you can't go and get a can of alcohol at 11 o'clock at night if you've just finished work and you only want one can. This is the very strange system that we have. And if you do that, you have to pay a minimum unit price in Jersey as well. So the first thing I ask is that government gets its house in order. It's not a unique problem that's faced this government only. Other governments haven't got their head around this, but I know that this government is very keen to not let the judiciary make decisions that politicians should be making. And I think they welcome that probably as well. Now let's get back more directly, sir, because I think you've probably given me a bit of latitude, but I think it's important to contextualise these debates. The point is that hospitality itself isn't homogenous either, and I would ask the hospitality industry why they are predicating their gift, if you like, as an industry on the sale of alcohol. If you go to a Muslim country, for example, they don't need to do that. So you can still go out and have fun. You can have a cup of tea, a cup of coffee. You can go to the theatre in a Muslim country, and I'm just using that as an example, or a country where it's not in their culture to automatically drink, and you can still have fun. So I think that's valid, but we have to also accept that we're in a different place as an island and as a European and a British dependency. So the mindset is still shifting. So let's get back to the point as to maybe why I don't support this government freeze. First of all, I think it's a dog's dinner. I think government should have had the courage to either say, no, we're not accepting this amendment. We want at least an RPI increase or above RPI, because that's been their rationale all the way through. Having a middle way doesn't actually solve anything. And I think the point is here that government needs to have that wider debate about alcohol strategy and alcohol policy, whether it's to do with economic development, to do with home affairs, or to do with health and social services, before it actually puts any form of increase forward on alcohol duty, sir. And I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other members speak on the amendment to the amendment? Conor Thompson-Brolard, then Deputy Farnham, then Deputy Ferry.
Thank you, sir. In common with several other colleagues, I've experienced these debates many times over the years, and the arguments don't seem to change a lot. There are a couple of points I'd like to draw members' attention to, and this is one that I've persistently mentioned, and it has come up in correspondence, is the difference in ABV, or the alcohol content of a particular drink, and taking it down to the points that the Home Affairs Minister has made, the effects of that on different people. And my view is that the higher the alcohol content is, the higher the tax should be on that particular drink. The basic effect of what is being proposed, whether it's 4.5 or higher, is that it'll shift the drinking habits from on license to off license. And that point was emphasised only this morning, sir, when I interviewed a manager for an off-license premises, and when asked him to comment on the proposals we'll be debating this morning, he said, "Oh, that'll be better for us because it'll move people from the pubs to the shop," which is actually a true point. And so, are we gaining anything by pushing the price up? I suspect not, and I think that sadly it just will stimulate people to drink more at home without the supervision that they would get in an on-licence position. And finally, so I'd like to comment on the Economic Development Minister's remarks yesterday. And I did rather feel at the time he did protest too much, because realistically, we've been going back for many years talking about revisiting, reviewing the licensing law, and whilst not personally, so his department have been lax in dealing with it. And I think we've got to the point, in order for us to be able to make a valid judgment in this sitting, sir, or in any sitting, we need to have a reasonable licensing law we can deal with. At the moment, I think it's fair to say it's all over the place. We get applications for various categories at parish hall level. We had only one a couple of weeks ago where a club wanted a first category licence. So you get a club licence which restricts its membership. They want to invite everybody in, so become a pub. So is it a club or a pub? And that remains to be seen when it goes to the licensing bench in due course. But it's messy, sir. And I do hope these comments are taken on board by the Economic Development Minister. Perhaps during his term, he can attack this once again and come up with a rather more balanced licensing law than we have already. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Farnham.
Thank you, sir. I think we need to remember the state of the economy. We need to remember where we are at the moment, the pressures on businesses on the back of the COVID pandemic, which actually wiped out the reserves of most businesses, especially hospitality, arguably the worst hit, but retail and other businesses as well. We are still recovering from that, and we are going to be recovering from that for many years to come. And on top of that, we are still insisting on clawing back all of the social security payments and GST payments and other payments that businesses were not able to make during the pandemic because they were shut and they weren't taking any business. And ironically, a lot of business who kept their staff on paid their staff throughout the pandemic, and as a result of that incurred social security and other payments and have to repay it back, where other jurisdictions have taken a more lenient approach. And I'm not saying we should or we shouldn't, sir, but we have to remember, by following the path we've taken, we are keeping these businesses under a lot of pressure for many more years to come. So this isn't an ordinary everyday budget debate on duty increases, where some of the points are made might be more appropriate than they are today. We have short memories, sir, when we fail to remember that we have had years of excessive duty on increases on alcohol and fuel, sir. And fuel, well, that's for another debate, but that also has a major impact on the cost of living. In the government plan, or this amendment, or any proposition or amendment to increase the cost of increased duty has no reference to the impact on the RPI, the cost of living index. And I know the Economic Development Minister chairs that board, but one of the recommendations from the previous group, that when there was a proposition to increase a price or a commodity or something, and I know there's limited levers on the actions we can take, the impact should be noted. Now, we don't know whether these duty increases and all the prices going up are going to have a 0.01% or 1%. We don't know what impact they're going to have on the already beleaguered and under pressure cost of living, but they will have an impact, and that impact will be going in the wrong direction, no matter how large or small it is. So our economy remains under enormous pressure, and bearing in mind that something like 70% of businesses are small businesses, those are the businesses that are being impacted by this. Larger businesses are still being impacted, but they are more able to deal with it. High cost of living, high inflation, costs of commodities rising, even if we do freeze duty rates, sir, which I strongly believe we should, there is still going to be immense price pressure on the industry. Prices won't stay the same. Just to counter some of the arguments made in the connection to health and the importance of price increases to health, which I think has been overplayed from time to time. Prices will rise, sir, because manufacturers will have to put prices up. Distribution costs will be going up. We've heard that Condor ferries are putting their freight costs up by 19%. That's all going to be pushed through to the front line with zero duty increases. So there are going to be increases and more pressures on margins for businesses. And the fact is, however sanctimonious we might be about the rights and wrongs of this, small businesses, especially in hospitality, are not going to be able to survive because of massive increase in costs of running their business and enormous squeezes on their profit margins, which are reducing. If you look at hospitality businesses particularly, you'll see that the payroll percentage of their turnover has increased significantly, and the gross profit margins they're achieving are reducing, and that is something that is not sustainable. And I don't know how the government can start off by saying we're going to go with the cost of living increase of whatever it was at the time, 10.1%, something like that, and then said, actually, we'll do a deal and we'll find a compromise at 4%. The difference in income between the 10 and the 4% they've soaked up, but that last bit of cost of 4% to zero is suddenly a big problem. And I note from the heads of expenditure that the Sustainable Economic Development Department's budget has increased over 2023 by £3 million. And I know my good friend, Deputy Morel, the Minister, is probably not going to be happy with me for saying that, but I'd like to be in his position with an extra £3 million, and I'm sure, given time or the right of reply, so he could account for every penny of that. But unlike other departments who have seen taking into account inflation, such as Home Affairs, and I'll come on to the Home Affairs Minister's speech in just a minute, I think it looks like his department is rightly called Sustainable Economic
Point of clarification,
because his
please,
budget is going to, and I'm not prepared to give away just at this point, sir, it's going to be very sustainable because they've got such a good increase in their budget. The Home Affairs Minister, I'm afraid I don't like to make light of the health issue because it is a very important issue, but she did trot out the same old lines that we've had time and time again from health ministers, scripted lines written by officers about the dangers of alcohol. And I don't take that lightly at all, but of course the only way to remove that altogether is to have some prohibition. Maybe we should do that for a year or two and see what that does to the crime rate. But of course, we know, and I'm sorry, sir, and I do have enormous respect for the Home Affairs Minister, but this, whilst saying that a zero increase in duty, so it's going to actually give the police a lot more work on Friday and Saturday night. So, and this from a minister who has presented a budget to the states that's going to put enormous pressure on frontline policing. I'm sorry, sir, that doesn't wash with me. I would rather actually it were the other way around. So, sir, I just urge members to think about the economic circumstances we find ourselves in, think about the challenges many small businesses, not just hospitality, are facing. And for this year, sir, let's go with a zero increase in duty, bearing in mind that costs are still likely to rise, regrettably, at the point of sale for alcoholic drinks because of the massive raises in inflation we've seen, sir. So there is, what I'm trying to say is that to try and alleviate the concerns of some of the health concerns is prices won't stay the same with a zero increase, they still will increase slightly. If we put any duty on, they're going to increase even more than that, which is something that's not sustainable at this moment in time, sir. Thank you.
Sir, if you don't mind, I would not like Deputy Farnham to be in a position of having inadvertently misled the Assembly, so I was wondering if I could have a point of clarification, please, sir.
Only if he agrees to deal with it.
Oh, yes, sir, I do.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. The Deputy said that the Minister for Sustainable Economics Development budget had risen by £3 million. He might want to clarify that it hasn't. The Department of the Economy, which includes financial services, that budget has risen by £3 million. He might want to clarify that. The Minister for Sustainable Economic Development's budget has not increased by that amount, sir. It is much less than that.
Well, so I was just looking at the copy of the heads of expenditure from the government plan, and under the heading Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture, they showed a approved budget for 2023 of £32,526,000, and for 2024, £35,537,000. So now it doesn't provide a breakdown in there. In fact, below it has financial services, which goes from 7.7 million to 11 million. So that's about a 7 million increase between them. So I'm sure if they get their heads together, they can find a bit of change for this.
I stand corrected then, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Ferry.
Thank you, sir. I'm probably one of a handful of States members who is completely teetotal. And we went out for an excellent States lunch last Friday, and I was sat close to the Dean and the Connétable of St Helier.
Not sure where this is going, sir.
who are not teetotal, sir. And the conversation got on to whiskey of which I know the Dean is rather partial to. And during the conversation, I was able to impart my knowledge of whisky, the reasons, the regions, the tasting notes, even getting onto subjects such as the Angel's Share. And the Conotab of St Helier remarked that for someone who was a complete teetotal, I have an extensive knowledge of whisky. And thinking about it overnight, it was because, of course, I used to be a connoisseur, sir. Now, other people may have a different word for that, but I was a connoisseur. So, I have seen the dark side of alcohol, sir, and this is not to scare anyone, but both in my professional life and my personal life, I have seen the very dark side of alcohol, and that's why I'm really grateful for the Minister for Home Affairs' comments in relation to that. But equally, sir, I'm not a Puritan, and I understand that hospitality needs support, and I also understand that loneliness can be a killer. And for some people, getting to the pub, socialising with friends is the only outlet that they have around the four walls that surround them. And that is an important part of the equation as well. Equally, too high prices lead to people pre-drinking at whatever age, loading up on alcohol too early and getting into problems elsewhere. But I believe that this amendment to the amendment offers the correct balance because it offers a modest increase whilst taking account of the current economic circumstances that we currently find ourselves in, sir. So in that regard, I will be supporting the amendment to the amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? Deputy Brenneth.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to deal with a couple of points first that have arisen during the debate. Deputy Tadier asked why I was shaking my head when he said the government was split because Deputy Miles had expressed support for a higher rate of tax. And actually, I can confirm that Deputy Miles is supporting the government position, which is a compromise. Deputy Farnham, I think, also offered a rather low blow against the Minister for Home Affairs, saying that her speech was written by officers. I know that the Home Affairs Minister needs no one to write her speeches for her on the question of alcohol. It is a subject on which she feels exceptionally passionate. And I think that was a totally unnecessary comment. So, I would like to start by noting, as one or two other speakers have, that we have a schizophrenic attitude to alcohol, both as a society, but also as a government, in a way, and as politicians. We have a very high level of alcohol consumption in Jersey, which we generally agree we want to reduce on public health grounds. Yet, whenever we try to reduce alcohol consumption, we come up against the established economic interests, particularly hospitality in the context of this island, that genuinely do depend on alcohol sales. There is a danger that what the hospitality industry is saying is that it needs to be able to sell at least as much alcohol as it is now in order to sustain itself. Personally, as Deputy Tadier said, I would like to see the hospitality industry show greater interest in reducing its apparent dependence on alcohol sales. But nevertheless, it is without doubt the case that the hospitality industry is under pressure on many fronts. The two positions that we have, that we want to reduce alcohol consumption, but we also want to support hospitality industry that depends on alcohol consumption, are ultimately not compatible. Sooner or later, we have to tackle this contradiction. But I accept we are where we are, which is why I am supporting the reduced increase in duty that is smaller than that was originally proposed. In other words, the amendment to the amendment. In general, I do support increasing the price of alcohol, but I accept that at the moment we have a cost of living crisis, so the middle way proposed in the amendment to the amendment seems to be right. No increase in duty in my view, would be the wrong signal to send. And I think it's worth remembering why we increase taxes on alcohol, because we often end up focusing on particular aspects of this issue rather than the whole picture. And this understanding the reasons for taxing alcohol and why taxing alcohol does have population level effects is very important. One of the reasons that taxes on alcohol are justified is that they reflect the health harm that alcohol consumption causes and the costs that fall on the public through increased health costs. That is an important point that applies for all alcohol sales, whether it's in hospitality or off license. We tax alcohol because it causes harm that we all pay for. Second, raising taxes will, in general and in aggregate, reduce consumption. Anyone who doubts this should consider the alternative proposition. What effect will cutting the price of alcohol have? It will increase consumption, of course. Therefore, the converse must be true. Raising the price of alcohol cuts consumption on average. That doesn't mean to say that everybody makes an immediate decision, but on average, across a population, some people will reflect on the cost and make a decision to either reduce or cut alcohol entirely. There are other points about this. Raising the price of alcohol in a fairly consistent way also sends a message about our attitude to alcohol, particularly, for example, to young people. And earlier it was referenced that young people are giving up alcohol in greater numbers. And we could potentially draw the conclusion that young people have seen what society is telling them about alcohol. And one of the way we send that message is through pricing. And the third reason, of course, is because it also raises money for the Exchequer, which is necessary to fund all the things that members of this Assembly want us to fund. So what about the argument that this disproportionately affects hospitality? Again, I think the issue here is about seeing the whole picture, the population level effects. Some people, it's argued, will opt for off-license sales to offset the price in pubs or restaurants, the increase in prices in pubs or restaurants. Well, they may. But others who are currently buying from off-licenses may cut back their expenditure in off-licenses, the net effect being a potential reduction. It's quite hard to see those population level effects because we look at it from a personal point of view and we tend to think, well, 4.5% increase on alcohol probably not going to affect my consumption. Therefore, it doesn't work. But it does work, and I can give one example from when I was working in London. And one day I noticed that my lunch costs at work had considerably risen, and it was costing more than £5 every day to buy lunch. I did some sums and realised that that was £25 a week, or £100 a month, or £1,000 a year. And I thought, hang on a minute. Perhaps I could find better uses for that £1,000 than spending it on lunches from Tesco or whatever. And so I started making my own sandwiches. Now, not everybody responds in that way, but some people do. And that's the point about the effect of price rises. Deputy Farnham says that prices will increase anyway. Well, to an extent, but the facts are that, this is from the Jersey Alcohol Survey, direct quote, between 2020 and 2022, the price of alcohol in Jersey increased. Yeah, it did. But inflation of alcohol price was lower than that of other household expenditure. And of course, 2023, we froze the duty completely. So there may have been some increases, but they have not been excessive. Deputy Tadier argued again on the individual point that there are people who will act badly without alcohol in their bloodstream. And of course, that is true. But that is irrelevant. On average, over time, people who drink cause more crime and have worse health issues. Well established. It's also argued that people with low incomes will no longer be able to have a drink. Well, Yes, they will. Just perhaps one drink fewer a week will mean they will have saved the money caused by the 4.5% increase in alcohol duty. And that, of course, on average, across the population, would be a good thing, because that's what we're aiming to do. But there's another point about low-income people that needs to be borne in mind. And again, it's seeing the whole picture. People on low incomes are by far more likely to suffer harm caused by alcohol. In Scotland, where, as it's already been pointed out, a lot of work has been done in this area, they found that rates of alcohol-related deaths were 5 times more likely in low-income groups. 5 times more likely. I'll close by just hammering home the link between pricing and consumption. A study in the UK, government study, comprehensive review. The evidence reviewed tends to suggest that increasing alcohol price reduces heavy drinking, and some studies also suggest that heavy drinkers may be more affected by price increases than responsible, moderate, or occasional drinkers. On balance, the evidence shows that increases in alcohol prices are linked to decreases in harms related to alcohol consumption. And the World Health Organization. I think this report has been referenced by some people, but this is a direct quote. Decades of research and country experiences from all over the world have shown that increasing the price of alcoholic beverages through taxation is one of the most cost-effective policies used to lower drinking levels and alcohol attributable harm. This has been recognized as a best buy intervention by the World Health Organization, delivering greater health impacts in reducing illness, disability, and premature death than other policy options. However, alcohol taxation remains one of the least implemented measures, largely due to opposition from economic operators and because price increases are generally unpopular with the public. I think that's a pretty fair summary of where we find ourselves in this island. So my view is that after 1 year of a duty freeze, a second year of a freeze would send the wrong signal. It's well established that the longer a freeze goes on, the harder it is to reinstitute it in the future. This amendment to an amendment establishes a compromise. It maintains the principle that there should be some continuing increase in alcohol prices, although in this case, well below both inflation and average earnings. Deputy Tadyer calls it a dog's dinner. I call it a compromise. At the same time, we have committed to a thorough examination of alcohol duties, and I support the idea that we should look at seeing whether we can, over time, flex the tax regimes relative to the off-license and on-license trade. So to conclude, sir, I would say that the amendment to the amendment that we have put forward strikes the best balance that we can, that bears in mind our public health responsibilities, our need to raise money to pay for the health harms that alcohol causes, whilst acknowledging the stress that the hospitality industry is under. Thank you, sir.
So I wonder if I could just beg your indulgence and ask if you're aware of how many speakers there are still to go at this point.
Well, only Deputy Rob Ward on my list at the moment. And let me tell you, then there's Deputy Wilson and the Conotable St Saviour and Deputy Gardner.
No, I would like to raise Defo on Deputy Douglas. She was online and her vote was present, wasn't registered.
Members content to raise Defo on Deputy Gardner? Defo is raised. Yes, sorry, I had Deputy Wilson and Conotable St Saviour, was it? So it's just 3 members.
Thank you.
Yes, Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. It's, I wasn't sure how to explain my position this way. I'd like to thank the Minister who helped me out a little. There were some strange analogies being made in this debate. One of them about the cost of sandwiches and make your own sandwiches. Now, I will note that what the Minister didn't do is give up eating sandwiches. He just made his own. Now, I don't know if the suggestion is make your own alcohol. I mean, we've all tried it. I remember when I was a student, sir, we brewed some alcohol. It was actually called Wizard Killer. It was totally unpalatable. And I'm sure, I have no idea what the the alcohol content was, because I never quite mastered that part of it, probably because we consumed the wizard killer whilst trying to actually work it out. So there are some, but there's a really serious point to that. Is we talk so often in this assembly about unintended consequences. And we also talk about our very specific economy and the specificity, and I've got that word out, I'm very pleased with myself, of Jersey as a place and of its industries. And there are huge pressures on the hospitality industry. From COVID, which was a horrendous experience for so many, everybody on this island, and for businesses and for those who try to make a living. And I think my colleague would have mentioned, for example, something that's close to my heart is the music industry on the island and events. And that has been seriously affected by people just not attending venues, and we've seen venues closing down because of the price of partly of getting a drink. Because you might want to go out and have a pint and watch a band play. There's nothing better for your health than watching live music. I really genuinely believe that. It's good for us. And what we need to be very careful of is thinking of the obstacles that we may put in the way of that. Now, in the past, sir, I would have absolutely supported, and I do support, I understand and I see the health issues. But I think what we've got here is a very convoluted argument that was mentioned before. What's happening, sir, and this happens with young people in particular, I think, or not actually, I think that's a stereotype that's unfair. I think we see more and more what are called pre-drinking, yeah, or prees. They go to someone's house for prees, is what it's apparently called. And what happens there is you consume as much alcohol as you possibly can that will get you through the rest of the night without having to go to one of the nightclubs and buy more than one drink because they're so expensive. And remember, we have a large amount of duty on our alcohol already. That's not going to go away from this decision. That amount of duty is already there. However, sir, not if you buy duty-free. If you travel a lot, and I'm not going to make any aspersions on travel, but if you travel a lot, you can come back with duty-free. If you've got a lot of air miles, you may also have a well-stocked drinks cabinet because you don't pay duty on that. So I think we've got some real clear points that we have to make in this argument. Also, sir, I would say if there is a huge health benefit, there needs to be some decisions made. And I'm going to say this, and I might not catch anybody's eye in the assembly. I'll look up, as I used to do so, if I didn't want to catch anyone's eye. I wonder whether when we have black tie dinners and when we have social events organised, if we are going to be puritanical about the effects of alcohol, which is probably correct, then we shouldn't be serving alcohol at those events. Because we do. And this is the extension of these arguments, if you take them to the fullest extension. And somebody mentioned about prohibition. Well, yeah, perhaps we need to try that. But you know what would happen, as this happens now, if you can travel a lot and you can get duty-free, there would just be private clubs where people can drink, and I'm sure we'd change the laws accordingly. One of the things that made me speak here is this notion, there was a mention made that amongst less wealthy households, the effect of alcohol is great. There are more effects of alcohol in those people. Yes, absolutely. But that's because there are other variables. And the largest variable there is poverty and inequality. And that inequality is exacerbated by regressive taxes, which is the middle name of this government, sir. A regressive tax. The better regressive way tax, conservative liberal coalition that will take your money where it can. I've said it, sir. It's probably unfair, but I've said it now anyway. And I think one of the things we need to be very careful of is this year in particular, post-COVID, given where we are with hospitality venues closing down, is the message that we send. And I'll finish with this bit because this is the bit that really got me thinking. People have mentioned the messages getting to young people. The messages getting to young people at the moment on this island are, it's unaffordable to live here. We're going to make everything as difficult as we can, like going and having a night out. We're going to make travel expensive for you. We're going to make owning everything expensive. Rent is expensive. And we're going to push you for just about everything that we can. And then when you make an intelligent decision, which is actually, I understand because I'm an intelligent individual myself who has gone through an education system and benefited from that hugely valuable education system, I'm going to make an intelligent decision, say I'm going to drink less and I'm going to get fitter because it's better for my health long term. I feel better about it, it's better for my mood, I'm more and more aware of my mental health, and I will make that decision. And then what we say, when those decisions are made, the metrics are that you're only doing that because we sent the messages we're going to tax alcohol more. You've got the metrics wrong. And the metrics of this increase in alcohol duty of 4.5%, which is a midway compromise and meaningless in many ways, is we're going to carry on taxing regardless of the situations we are now. And for once, I think we have to say, actually, no, not this time. The compromise doesn't work either. So we need to vote against this amendment. And I will be supportive of a freeze this year for the very specific reasons that I give, because I think it will send the right metrics and it will say to people, we're going to support an industry where we can. We're going to support your intelligent decisions. We don't want you to do massive pre-drinking before you go out. We want a music industry. We want live music. We want people to be able to go out and have a good time. And the other issues of inequality and poverty and mental health, we will address through other areas of our policy, such as a fairer taxation system, a fairer rent system, and all of those issues that we talk about so often in this Assembly. So let's not convolute, and I would urge members not to support this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. I find myself in an uncomfortable position speaking on this issue. As the Minister responsible for health in the island, my preference would have been to see a much bigger increase in alcohol duties in order to reverse Jersey's position as the second highest ranking country amongst OECD member states for alcohol consumption, something we should all be concerned about. The health-related evidence on the effects and the impact of alcohol is overwhelming, and you've only to read the Public Health Intelligence Report, as many members have referred to this morning, on Jersey's alcohol profile to gain further understanding of this and listen further to the recent podcast from the Chief Executive at Silkworth Lodge, who recounted the impact excessive consumption has on the lives of people within our community. Freezing alcohol duties is not something I support, but taking a proportionate approach to this complex issue would hopefully avoid criticism of important public health initiatives which are being caricatured as the enemy of economic development in the island. The thing we have to consider is what balance must be achieved. We don't want to be killjoys and we don't want to harm business. But on the other hand, we cannot ignore the economic costs associated with alcohol consumption and the harms caused by it. I just want to give some indication of the scale of the harm. 1 in 5 adults drink in excess in Jersey. 33% of people report binge drinking at a frequency of monthly. The rate of harmful drinking is higher in men, with 1 in 3 men and 1 in 6 women. Heavier drinkers have higher rates of sickness leave and are more likely to be unemployed, resulting in a loss of economic activity. In 2021, there were 725 hospital admissions specifically related to alcohol, 2/3 of which were males. 23% of offences in the St Helier nighttime economy involve alcohol. And I don't want to repeat some of the statistics that my colleague, the Minister for Home Affairs, referred to earlier. It's too easy to say that alcohol leads to illnesses. Let me just remind members what they look like. Liver disease, cancer, stroke, fetal alcohol syndrome in children, infertility, depression, dementia, and further consequences that involve family breakup, divorce, unemployment, suicide, homelessness, financial problems, and road traffic accidents. Denying these harms and not investing in services to address them does put our economy at risk. If we can reduce harm by placing a duty on the cost of alcohol, which is actually a proven technique, we get more for the taxpayer to prevent these harms and reduce all of the health conditions associated with alcohol consumption, which then need treating at the expense of the taxpayer. Research conducted by the Institute of Alcohol Studies at the University of Strathclyde highlighted the potential for a double dividend of a simultaneous improvement in health and a stimulus to the economy when alcohol duties are increased. So we must, through this debate, sir, arrive at a place where the complex set of circumstances relating to duties on alcohol can be addressed proportionately, and the reason I'm supporting the amendment to the amendment is for this reason. We have got to bring alcohol consumption down, but we've also got to work with the hospitality industry to help us to do that. This has been achieved in other countries, so why can't we do this here? The Minister for Home Affairs referred to Lithuania, and I can expand on their approach. They took a very hardline approach by increasing the price of alcohol drastically and rapidly for alcoholic beverages, which were the cheapest. This was followed by increases in beverages with a higher alcohol content. Alcohol advertising was banned. The age you could buy and consume alcohol was increased from 18 to 20, and alcohol selling hours were introduced and resulted in a decrease in consumption, alcohol-related incidents, and alcohol-related deaths. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should go to that extreme here in Jersey, but I do believe that we should look at some of the other examples of where there are interesting ways to tackle some of the issues. In August this year, the UK introduced a new duty system after listening feedback to industry, economists, public health groups, and many business owners, which is based on the founding principle of taxing alcoholic products by strength. It's believed that applying a newer lower rate of duty on drinks less than 3.5% alcohol by volume per litre of alcohol will help to encourage and innovate new lower strength drinks to support responsible drinking in the UK. They took the approach to work across all industries, but we find ourselves locked into a scenario where public health initiatives designed to tackle harms are at times considered an enemy to the industry and used as a reason to explain why the hospitality industry is struggling. So far, the evidence suggests that the approach we've taken to raising duties on alcohol is working. And as we've heard, the number of 16 to 34-year-olds consuming alcohol is reducing, and the number of people teetotal has doubled between 2014 and 2022. This will have many economic benefits in our community for the longer term. There are signs in society that people are developing a new relationship with alcohol. It doesn't matter where or with whom you choose to access alcohol. The way forward is managing the volume you consume and drinking responsibly. So this is a controversial subject area, and as Health Minister, my job is to ensure we improve health outcomes. So while this level of duty is less than what was originally asked for, freezing alcohol duty will not assist in addressing harms related to alcohol consumption and places greater pressure on an already stretched health system to deal with such harm. I urge members to reject a freeze on alcohol duties, but to be more proportionate in their response and support the amendment to the amendment, which strikes a balance between reducing alcohol-related harm, increasing income for government to spend on essential services, and supporting our local economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Conor St Saviour.
Thank you, sir. And I think I have to come out of the closet, as it were, straight away.
and I'm one of the others that are completely teetotal. I don't have a past in that respect. I've never been a drinker. I wouldn't know a single malt from a triple malt, but there you go. I wouldn't argue with the statistics from the health minister, except for one when it's when they work out how many units each individual has per year. I always think, well, who's had mine? But I know that there are people out there who do have problems with alcohol, but is alcohol the problem, or is alcohol a symptom of a deeper problem? And I would, the overwhelming majority of people work very hard and they'd like to go out at night and have a drink. I don't have a problem with that. Good luck to them. Cheers. Good health to you. I have absolutely zero tolerance for anyone who drinks and drives, which is possibly one reason why I'm very popular at parties. Oh, good old Kevin, he can drive us home. That I used to get my leg pulled as a young man. Going to the pub with friends. Oh, Kevin doesn't drink. Oh, go on, Kevin, have something else. Okay, bag of peanuts. And then people left me alone. And I don't think I've suffered badly from that over the years of being teetotal. And as has been said, we've had a discotheque closed down recently, or nightclub, give my age away there. A nightclub's closed recently, and there's possibly more to come. And people have suffered very badly with the effects of COVID. And many businesses have closed. And I don't think this would necessarily cure the problem. That the alcohol duty is going to go up, because as has been said, we are going to have up to 20% increase on shipping. That will put alcohol anyway, so the job's done for the government in that respect. And as I say, it's I can read my own notes here. It's going to be one of those trials this year that we have to go through. But I feel that I will be voting against the amendment and voting for the main proposition. People had sometimes doing two jobs, and they just like to go out and unwind with friends. So with responsible drinking, I do not have a problem, and wish them well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conatap. Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. Can I be heard in the chamber now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Thank you. Just to clarify for members, I'm at home today due to the school being closed, caring for my child whilst working. And I want to talk about children, sir, because the Health Minister and the Home Affairs Minister have mentioned many different statistics. And I wanted to add a few more and build on some of the things that they have mentioned and take a children's rights perspective to the issue that's before us today. And indeed, sir, abuse, domestic abuse is very common during pregnancy. So even before a child is born, they can be at risk from domestic abuse caused by alcohol. And 55%, the World Health Organization estimates that around 55% of domestic abuse perpetrators were drinking alcohol prior to the assault, and women who are abused are 15 times more likely to abuse alcohol. Another statistic is 1 in 6 abused women is first abused during pregnancy. And in fact, this is so prevalent that our health services, the midwives, have a standard question that they ask women when they go for their first midwife appointment when they're first pregnant, and they are asked whether they are being subjected to any abuse at home. It is that common during pregnancy. When a child is born, sir, 40% of confirmed cases of child mistreatment involved alcohol or other drugs. And another issue that I wanted to raise with the Assembly, and it's one that has been largely invisible in Jersey, although when I was a teacher, I was informally trained in how to spot the signs in children. Fetal alcohol syndrome is something that is very common in Jersey, and I think we've yet to understand how common it actually is. I just wanted to note, sir, that there shouldn't be a stigma around this condition, because it is often caused by damage by women drinking alcohol before they knew they were pregnant. So women are often blameless in this respect, and I think our culture of drinking should be blamed rather than any individuals. And it's this culture of alcohol consumption that this duty increase would go a long way towards tackling. And so fetal alcohol syndrome has a massive impact on children. Some of the increased need in our school, of course, we don't know exactly the reasons behind the increased need in our school, which we are putting a huge amounts of money into tackling and supporting children with increased needs in our school. It could be down to screen use, the impact of COVID, other social factors. But I believe that because prior to this government, sir, there was not even a facility locally that could diagnose this syndrome in the island. I think it is a really underestimated problem in our schools. And the symptoms of this disease, well, it's where alcohol use during pregnancy causes irreversible brain damage to the child. And it causes poor coordination, hyperactive behaviour, difficulty with attention, poor memory, learning disabilities, speech and language delays, intellectual disabilities, poor reasoning and judgment skills, vision or hearing problems, problems with the heart, kidneys or bones. And I could go on, sir. So we do need to start taking our culture of alcohol consumption, excessive alcohol consumption, we need to start taking it seriously, and we need to start taking more of a children's rights approach to this, because children are being actively harmed by the culture that we have in Jersey today. So I will be supporting duty increases, and I hope that members will, at the very least, support this this amendment, which will go some way towards addressing some of the problems.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on the amendment? I guess I'll call upon the Minister for Treasury and Resources to reply. Minister.
Thank you, sir. Not an easy debate to reply to, because I understand those members' positions who and the panel themselves in their amendment calling for a freeze. And the reasons that one might support a freeze, those arguments have been articulated. But I did just want to comment on the speech of a seasoned operator who stood up and rightly informed us that it's not a good thing in politics to be polarised. And that the arguments on both sides are not simple nor straightforward, but then went on to say, because they were neither simple nor straightforward, the middle ground was not the ground to occupy. Rather, we should pick an extreme. Whilst on the one hand, that is makes for appealing and robust political speech making, I'd just like to explore whether the conclusion of an argument which is nuanced and balanced is to take an extreme position in either angle or on either side. And for me, it isn't. I think the difficulties have been well articulated. And I do find it somewhat frustrating that we, in common with lots of other parliaments, start to cast doubt on statistics produced either locally by the Health Department or international studies looking at the consumption of alcohol, and I referred to that study which was across 112 countries in my opening comments. We can't allow anecdote to override proper peer-reviewed studies into behaviour. That's not what this assembly is renowned for, and it wouldn't and isn't appropriate. Nor Sir, can we simply, because people under stress circumstances might behave in a way which the law says is intolerable, nor should we, because of that, dismiss the concerns that the Home Affairs Minister rightly articulated, and she and her officers across her departments, if I can call them that, they're not departments, of course, but that's shorthand, experience on a, I'd like to say, weekly basis. Unfortunately, I fear it's becoming more common even than that. And therefore, there are truths in the detrimental health impacts of the excessive consumption of alcohol, or even in the consumption of alcohol. Actually, we're finding more and more, challenge to me, sir, as I know it would be to you. And nor can we simply ignore the public order effects of excessive consumption of alcohol as well. So that's one side of the argument. I don't think either today we can ignore, nor are ministers asking members to ignore, the voices of the hospitality sector. And the reason I say that we are not ignoring those voices is because when we had our initial discussion about duties on alcohol, we very much were cognizant of the health and public order issues, and that's why we put forward not quite an inflationary rise, 8.9 rather than 10.9. But we have listened to the difficulties that the hospitality sector have rightly relayed to us. My officers at Treasury have come up with all sorts of potential weird and wonderful options that, on balance, I think we decided would be too complex and wouldn't help in dealing with those concerns that that the hospitality sector relayed to us. And so we are seeking to balance those nuanced arguments with a rise, because of course it's really important that we present a balanced budget, and we're seeking in this amendment to recognise the arguments made by the panel, to recognise the arguments made by hospitality, but at the same time to recognise the very real effects that alcohol consumption has in our community. Now, we know that hospitality sector suffered during COVID, as Deputy Farnham reminded us. They were supported with considerable support during that period, as he knows, and the relevant departments are taking a lenient, we've seen some commentary recently suggesting that we're being too lenient with some of these businesses, but we're taking a lenient approach to helping them as they come through COVID and they've got social security contributions or GST contributions. Remind ourselves, of course, that the hospitality sector is a zero tax paying sector, so it doesn't pay corporate tax. It's just got either GST or it's got its ITIS that it pays over on behalf of its staff and the element of social security. So we're taking a lenient approach there. The other issue about the balancing of budgets, and I've got to say that, again, I think Deputy Farnham was unfair to his former Assistant Minister, now the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development, and, as we heard the Assistant Chief Minister say, this proposal, if we don't go with the amendment, does take money out of both of those budgets. Cabinet Office 700,000, Tourism, Sport and Culture 300,000, and members might say, well, they're only small amounts, they can deal with them. But I remind members that in the amendment which will take money from bottom lines to support agriculture, the Sustainable Economic Development Minister is taking a cut to his budget there of £1 million. The Cabinet Office, within which sits M&D, is also proposing to have a cut to their budget there of £1 million. So it's not just in isolation that we take these changes, we take them in their whole round of the government plan. I know that the Sustainable Economic Development Minister is concerned about the hospitality industry, about the renewal of modern, fit-for-purpose jobs. And we have seen, even during a period of a duty freeze, institutions closing. Some institutions might have taken out borrowings at times of low interest rates and invested heavily, and that's not worked out for all the reasons that we would understand. Economic circumstances have changed, those businesses are operating in a very different environment. Others are simply not getting the paying customers or the footfall. And that is a challenge because how does government support those operators? And that's difficult because each one of us, there's that old phrase, use it or lose it, and that can be from local shops to a nightclub to our hospitality venues. We as a community have to show that we value them with our custom and with the spending of our own pounds. So the Constable of St Rillard spoke about the licensing law, and I know that is something again that the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development is pushing forward. What we are proposing to do in Treasury is separate from the licensing legislation. Of course, what we are proposing to do is to look at the duties across the range of alcohol, because we absolutely accept the argument that there needs to be, moving forward, a level playing field. That is, a level playing field around where the duty lies in regard to strength. Although we all know, again, there's no easy solutions here. We all know that wine is has less duty per volume than beer. Let's be totally honest, there is a reason for that, and that is because policymakers, on the whole, we look across the world, we see they're making policy decisions in their own interest, and we need to address that, and we're committed to addressing that in Treasury. And again, the same is with spirits. And we also need to address, although there is no model globally, other than one which is quite bureaucratic, as I mentioned earlier, around the differential between on and off licenses, and other countries use a cashback methodology to reduce in arrears the duties that on licenses pay. That will be more bureaucracy, because on licenses will need to be able to record their sales in a different way so that we can give that cash back. But we remind ourselves, at the point that we bring those forward in the next government plan, it's not necessarily going to be any easier, because off licenses will start saying and making representations to members as well. But we are committed to do that, and we will do that. That needs to happen alongside the licensing work as well. And so I come back to Deputy Tadia's point. These are nuanced. They are difficult arguments. And that is why I believe that a balanced approach, which is a compromise, and there's nothing wrong with that, that is our system of government, that we work together to find solutions to problems and to issues. That is why I think that this is a reasonable, a sensible, and a proportionate amendment, and I ask members to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the appel called for?
Yes, please, sir.
Will this be taken in parts?
Yes, sir, I'm happy to take one and two together and then three separate.
Thank you, sir. Sorry, sir, can 1 and 2 relates to the duty, and 3, the duty not being frozen and having the compromise duty. And the part 3 relates to the proposal that the minister work with amending the way in which duty is levied.
There'll be a review, yes. Yeah. So 1 and 2 together, and 3 separately. Minister, that's what you're proposing?
Yes, I'm happy to propose
yes. That. All right. So members are invited to return to their seats. I invite the greffier to open the voting in relation to the first 2 parts of the amendment.
First 2 parts?
Yes. Four members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that the amendment to the amendment has been adopted. 27 votes pour, 19 votes contre, and 1 abstention.
Can we have the 19 and the 1, please?
Yes.
Those voting contre, the Connétables of St Brelard and Trinity and St Martin and St Saviour, Deputies Southern, Tadyer, Lehegara, Rob Ward, Alves, Farnham, Mesick, Coles, Porray, Scott, Catherine Curtis, Feltham, Rose Binet, Howell and Kovac. And the Connétable of St Clement has abstained.
I've moved to vote on the 3rd part of the amendment. I invite the greffier to open the voting. If all members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. And part 3 of the amendment has been adopted. 43 votes pour, 2 votes contra, and 2 abstentions. We now move back to the 25th Amendment as amended. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment as amended? Yes.
Thanks, sir. I can't resist being the little boy in the Emperor's New Clothes, and maybe others will follow when I point out that the government's position and their arguments haven't been at all consistent here. It's very strange that we have cost of living this year is at 10%. People's wages have gone up by about 7 to 8%. yet government haven't increased duty on alcohol by that amount. They've actually done it by 4.5%. So what the government's saying loud and clear is that we are making we're making alcohol cheaper for you, certainly in terms of the duty we're charging. But all of the arguments we've just heard in the last debate were about making alcohol more expensive for people. So I'm not sure why we've ended up in this position. Pretty much every member who spoke from government, the Home Affairs Minister, the Health Minister, we even had Deputy Doublé joining us from in the ether and talking to us about pregnant women who drink whilst they're pregnant, and it has an effect on the child. But of course, I was thinking then, well, if a pregnant woman gets a bottle of vodka on Condor ferries and brings it back to Jersey and drinks that, she's not paying any duty at all. And the government strategy and the education department and young people are not dealing with that issue. So all of those issues that have been raised to justify this dog's dinner position that we're now in, where the Chief Minister's not even supporting her own ministers, I find very strange, because they've effectively given up £1 million here, and that's £1 million that could have been spent on health and home affairs. So I'm just calling it as it is. We've got this very strange position where government's actually reducing duty to 4.5%, and I'm wondering whether we can actually support that position now, or whether we should actually just have the full increase on duty. So very strange, isn't it, that we find ourselves in that position?
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on the... Yes, Deputy Farnham.
Thanks. I just wanted to say how disappointed I am that the Assembly has decided to impose this a duty on a sector of our economy, an important sector of our economy, so at such challenging times, forcing many of us now to support an amended amendment that we don't actually support, because the alternative is to go to an 8.9% increase. So I can't even try to persuade members to a vote against the amended amendment, if that's clear, sir. I think rather than pretend that if we don't support this, albeit smaller increase, a smaller compromise in duty, the island's going to fall apart with drunkenness and further alcohol problems. Because you can drill down into the figures and a great detail. And I think there needs to be a lot more emphasis and education and information shared with the public on initiatives that can address some of the issues we're having with, fortunately, the vast minority of people that do have a problem with alcohol. So please, let's try and use that to help people to improve the health of islanders. We should be spending double, treble, 5 times more on getting that message out there and looking at all the useful schemes and initiatives there are. So young people are leading the way. We've seen that. Young people are turning away from alcohol. I align it to back in the day when many of us were younger, we had the anti-smoking. Most of us probably smoked at school. I know well, not at school, not during lessons anyway, but although I had seen that happen when I did a stretch at Lekeneve School back in the day. So, but I joke. But then, of course, we all started to learn about the dangers of smoking, and I actually see that repeating itself now with young people and alcohol. So that is good. So let us now focus on education rather than penalising an industry that's literally on its knees, given the circumstances we find ourselves in. I think this is a bad day for the Assembly. I think we've made the wrong decision, albeit democratically. And we will, unfortunately, see more hospitality businesses closing in the months ahead. Because outside of the increases we've imposed on them today, there's heat, light, water, energy, just about everything businesses are dealing with are increasing. As a result of this decision, more businesses will fail, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, sir. Very briefly, from an external point of view, may I say that I've listened to the debate, Like Deputy Ferry, I am currently a teetotaler, although I don't need to be anymore, apparently, because I'm better. But the world outside is in turmoil. The UK is in turmoil, sir. Deputy Tadyer said that there was an inconsistent line from ministers. I would respectfully say that there isn't. There is no binary solution, as Deputy Farnham would have us believe, maybe, that simply the solution for hospitality is simply about alcohol duties. It's not. There are significant issues which are externalities which are affecting Jersey. But in this debate, what we can do is we can take a pragmatic and proportional approach, which is what the Council of Ministers has done, and we can take the message generally outside from this budget debate that we are not an island in turmoil, that we will not take binary solutions, we will take the right decisions because we are a rock of stability in a world of turmoil, and this is about sending a confident message of an island that has got good public finances, is not in turmoil, and that there is an assembly with the Council of Ministers is focusing on the things that matter for our valued hospitality industry, which is not just about alcohol. It is about recruitment and many other issues which they do, and I would strongly suggest that some of the business failures that we have said we have spoken about, and Deputy Farnham has said we're going to see more failures in hospitality. I don't think there will be because of alcohol duties, sir. There will be the other things that the Council of Ministers, like ministers and governments around the world, must attend to. Recruitment crisis, cost of living issues and others. Those are the issues that we must tackle, and the Council of Ministers, I think, is unified on tackling those issues, sir. And I urge members to support the amendment.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, Sir. Deputy Joseph said he was speaking from an external point of view, and it sounded like it was an external one to this realm of reality. How out of touch do you have to be to think that this will have a positive impact in any sense in our economy and wider society? I align myself entirely with what Deputy Farnham said about this and think that this is a sad outcome, although better than it otherwise could have been, and so obviously has to be supported. But I hope, sir, that the third part of the amendment to the amendment, having been accepted, will provide an opportunity for government to treat seriously what it may be able to do to support hospitality. Otherwise, we will simply find ourselves in this exact same position next year, with more businesses on the line, more places threatened with closure, and the inflationary pressures from other aspects, like housing and all the rest, which this government has absolutely no proposals whatsoever to deal with, continuing to make that worse, and businesses will be coming to us time and time again to a government that claims to be pro-business but is so in nothing other than words rather than actions, and we'll simply find ourselves here again next year.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on the amendment? Deputy Kovacs, then Deputy Redmond.
Thank you, sir. I intended just on the last minute to speak on the amendment to amendment, but I didn't put my light in time. Now we're at the outcome that we have to vote on the compromise solution, but I just want to make some points. And nobody negates the impact of high alcohol consumption on both health and crimes or violence. But increasing taxes on it won't solve the problem for addicts. An addiction is a health condition which can't be addressed by taxes. They will always find more dangerous ways to find resources for it, like selling family goods, or revert to drinking more at home in an uncontrolled environment. As the St. Xavier Constable said, consumption of alcohol in excess is a symptom, an illness, I would say. Do we believe that we can treat an illness with tax? The former St. Xavier Constable, Le Sœur Renard, said in a similar debate in 2018, and she did not always speak a lot, but when she did, she was always direct, so I'll just quote a very short phrase from that debate when she said, "I have first-hand knowledge, as most of you will know, about alcoholism, and putting the price up will not solve any problems because they will find the money that they need for the drink regardless, and in the end will be the family who will suffer because the family will not have money either for food or for any other bits and pieces because the alcoholic will have wanted the money for drinks. Jewelry will be sold, any value will go, and that is in the household, and then you get your domestic violence. Trust me, it does not work. I have been there nearly 25 years, and it does not work putting the price up. It does not help." If we take the statement to tax alcohol to stop alcohol violence and crime, should we tax knives to stop knives crime or work on the root cause? Or if frozen fuel duty, does that mean we're supporting speeding? Deputy Renov said, if I recall it right, he gave some stats example of alcohol consumption reduction between 2020 and 2022. We should not forget that period we had the pandemic and socializing in a pub was very limited, so not sure how relevant is that data. He also said he would like to see hospitality not being dependent on selling alcohol to survive. Should we then close pubs altogether, as that's their business activity? As the measured alcohol duty declines, will the government increase more the duty to make up for it? So where I'm coming from with all this is exactly how Deputy Farnham said. It is the wrong period to have this increase. It will affect badly the businesses that are already on the verge and are really needing this kind of support to survive. So now we have this compromise solution, and I urge you to support it.
Thank you, Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to be clear that where we are at the moment is if we have to vote for something we don't really agree with, otherwise the outcome is even worse. So we vote for the amendment, which is 4.5%. If we don't vote for that, there'll be an 8.9%, a favourite figure of the government, increase in fuel duty. And so we're all put in a difficult position. I think that needs to be made clear to the hospitality industry as the position we've been put into, because the metrics and the messages are very important. I don't know how much a full-page advert in the JEP costs, but I know they can be used for other propaganda. Perhaps they should be used to get this message across.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other motion speak on the amendment? I call upon Deputy Scott to reply.
Thank you, sir. I thank members for their contributions to the debate. I would like to assure pubs and restaurants and everyone in the hospitality industry of the panel's continued support. My late father, who died at the age of 94, would go to the pub for a pint every lunchtime and every evening. I don't wish to suggest it was the alcohol that made him live so long, but he exercised a lot in his youth, and he made the effort to go to the pub to socialise. And the people in the pub generally kept an eye out for each other. Had they had enough to drink? Were they driving? Were they being civil to each other? If children were allowed in the pub, were they being looked after? I also had a family member who was an alcoholic. His lifestyle was very different. Economic productivity requires us all to work productively. And there have been speeches by members that have ignored the fact that prices are going to go up significantly in the hospitality industry, whether or not alcohol duty is added. Alcohol prices in Jersey already are higher than in the UK, which has frozen alcohol duty. It was ironic to hear that crime rates were down last year when there was an alcohol freeze in place. I would have liked to have heard more from the ministers about their views on duty-free alcohol outlets supported by government. And as for the minister who referred to an attitude of schizophrenic, I would like the Minister for Health to have a word with him about that condition. I nevertheless thank the Council for having shown support for the amended proposition, which is what we now have to vote upon. When agreeing to changes that can impact on the operations of any industry, it is important that consequences are considered. In this case, the Jersey Hospitality Association has referred to a tsunami of rising costs and described the proposal to increase alcohol duty as a compound recipe for disaster for hospitality, as the industry is facing other significant costs this year. Randall's, in commenting on the state of the industry, which is beleaguered by increased operating costs, with customers themselves challenged by increased costs of housing and life, has said there may be no second chance. The well-being of islanders is important to the panel, as well as to the hospitality industry. And more islanders are finding challenges in being able to meet socially after a busy day of week as they try to make the island more economically productive. Has government even considered that if it takes away this way from raises duty, and it obviously has, and it will be, 4 out of 5 people who aren't excessive drinkers, well, what could be the negative impact on their well-being? But anyway, we are where we are. One submission basically said, and this was the Institute directors, whilst the IID is comprised of industry leaders, we are also hard-working individuals with families, and we note what the alcohol duty has a knock-on effect on each islander. So I do very much urge the Assembly to support this proposition. The Jersey Hospitality Association has expressed its willingness to work with government in their campaign, and I hope it is a continued campaign that will be evolved to promote responsible drinking. Raising the alcohol duty just isn't enough. And I can assure the government of the panel's willingness to work with the government in this respect too. Sir, Jersey traditionally has resisted the adoption of Guernsey's Puritan traditions. So I hope the spirit of sound judgment remains in this State's Assembly. I very much urge members to support this proposition. Vote poor. Thank you, sir.
Is the appel called for? Yes, thank you. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting on the 25th Amendment as amended. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting.
I'm so sorry, sir. I've accidentally touched Deputy Binay's on the way through, thinking I've pressed my button and his button. I'm so sorry.
Can you... All right, well, thank you for declaring that. We'll take it into account. I invite the greffier to close the voting. And I can announce that the amendment has been adopted, 45 votes for, no votes contra, and 1 abstention.
So can we have the abstention, please?
Yes.
It's the Conotab of St Clement.
We now move on to the 14th Amendment, proposed by Deputy Mezek, and I invite the greffier to read the 14th Amendment.
Paragraph B. After the words domestic liquid and solid waste, insert the words, but excluding the consideration of any charges that are regressive and do not take into account the proportionality of payments to the income of the payee.
Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. In the Chief Minister's proposing speech for the government plan yesterday, she talked about the amendments that have been lodged to this plan in their entirety and her views about the prudence of those proposed amendments. And she referred to Jersey's tax principles, in which she said, "We can't undermine these principles and we don't want to raise taxes." Well, sir, let there be absolutely no doubt that they do want to raise taxes, as is very clear in Part B of the government plan proposition that is precisely what they're planning to do. And also referred to in that proposition is the sustainable funding mechanism for health, which I'm sure will be tax-based unless they can find some magic money tree to pay for it. Sir, raising taxes is precisely what the government is aiming to do, but they are using language to try to avoid a proper debate on that. The purpose of this amendment, sir, is to try to have an honest debate and give an indication to the government about what we are and are not prepared to accept on that. Sir, in proposing a waste tax, the government is seeking to tax us to provide a service that it already taxes us to provide for that service. That is what the waste tax will do. They will introduce some form of mechanism for extracting more money out of people and businesses who already pay into the pot to provide for a service which we already get. And so they may say they need more funding for it to provide a more sustainable funding mechanism for it because of the investment that is needed in our waste system. And I may be sympathetic to that argument, sir, because there does need to be investment into that system. But I do not want to see a new tax or charge introduced that has a regressive impact and harms those households and businesses in this tough economic times that we're facing. So, sir, in proposing paragraph B of this government plan, the government is asking for permission to be given to them so that they can dedicate resources into investigating a new waste tax or charge. And they need to do that because a previous States Assembly explicitly forbade them from being able to even dedicate resources to investigating it when that was debated in a previous budget. Sorry, so I'm just slightly distracted by the noise behind me. So, sir, they need the state's permission to lift that prohibition so that they can look at mechanisms for charging waste. And the purposes of this amendment is to enable the government to have that prohibition lifted, but not lifted entirely if it involves dedicating government time and resources to a particular kind of tax or charging mechanism that could end up being unpalatable to this Assembly because of who it targets and the distributional impact it has, where it may in the future come to this Assembly and be defeated, thus rendering all of that time and resource investigating it completely futile. So, sir, I'm asking the Assembly to agree that if the government is to look at mechanisms for charging for waste, that should not include mechanisms which are regressive. Sir, the definition of a regressive tax is a tax where the effective rate increases as the taxable base decreases. Or to put that another way, it's to proportionately charge more to those who are least able to pay. According to my principles, sir, I think that is an unfair way to tax, and I think it's short-sighted because of the economic harm that it does, and it is much better to have progressive taxes, which is where the effective rate increases as the taxable base increases. It asks those with the broader shoulders to carry more of the burden. So, sir, in giving the government permission to investigate charging mechanisms for waste, by adopting this amendment, we would be saying to them, go ahead and do that work, but don't waste your time coming up with mechanisms that disproportionately charge those who are the least able to pay it. That is an issue of principle that I think we can decide on today, rather than sending the government to do all of this work and come back later with something that we might find unpalatable. And that's so important to do, sir, because of the tough economic times that we're facing, and the government is talking about introducing a tax, be it stealth or otherwise, on households and businesses. That will have an impact on them. They'll be paying something extra, but receiving actually nothing for it. They'll still be receiving the service that they are currently paying for. So for households, sir, asking those of already limited means to pay potentially more or even the same as those who have much more income and who frankly wouldn't notice as much if they had to pay a little bit more as a household on a low income, we should say today that we don't want to see that kind of mechanism. So to add on another cost of doing business for small businesses, most of those will be in hospitality and catering, who inevitably need to benefit from the waste disposal systems because of the nature of the business that they do, and throw in another cost of doing business on top of that in exchange for nothing new and nothing extra, and base that purely on the fact that they exist and operate, and not charge it in relation to their profitability. To say to a business that is, potentially raking it in and making loads of money, that they pay more, whereas one that is struggling, that we won't risk throwing another charge on top of them at a level that's going to see them go under because they can't afford it. So the government asks us to reject this amendment in their comments paper because it would limit their ability to look at all sorts of mechanisms. Also, I say good. They should be limited in their ability to look at mechanisms which this Assembly might find unpalatable or which go against the basic principles that I would hope all members would want to see about fair taxation and supporting our economy and supporting households that are struggling. To look at mechanisms that would harm those is to waste time and resources that ought to be more appropriately directed at mechanisms that are fair and more likely to command the support of this Assembly. So in making this amendment, I ask the Assembly to maintain that prohibition for that particular kind of charging mechanism, to say to the government, you are still forbidden for considering regressive charging mechanisms, and instead focus your resources on either progressive measures or, at the very least, proportionate measures, because those are substantially fairer. And that's why I make the amendment, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Does any member to speak on this amendment? If no member wishes to speak, then I... Minister of Infrastructure, Deputy Binet.
Thank you, sir. I'm surprised that nobody wanted to speak. I hope I might have something to say. But I think I'd like to tackle first the issue about double tax, which has been made by Deputy Mezek. I have to say I very much understand that issue, and I think it's fair to say that the plan here isn't to introduce a tax that replaces the tax that people are paying. This is the essential idea here is to introduce a tax to bring in the amount of money that we need to cover the underinvestment that's been going on for some considerable time. I'd also make the point that nobody in the Assembly has a monopoly on care for people on lower incomes, or the worry about the place that businesses find themselves in at this particular point in time. There may or may not be further comment, but I would just ask members to remember that all we're looking to do here is simply undertake exploratory work, sir. It's nothing more than that. We've already made a clear commitment to undertake impact assessments on the likely effects of any proposed charges. That's so that we can understand the potential impacts for the community and for businesses, sir. Why on earth would the Assembly seek to restrict the way we undertake that work even before it starts? I have to say, coming from Deputy Mezek, it seems, I don't know if undemocratic is the way to describe it, but it's a strange approach to be prevented from even thinking about an issue properly before we can reach a conclusion, sir. I just think it's in the interest of fairness and transparency. We should really be left to consider every combination, and it might include increasing income support for people on low incomes, sir. So I don't think it's fair to tie our hands or put us in a straitjacket before we start the process. I think we're all acutely aware of the effects that this may have, and I think we're all sensible enough to come back with some sensible propositions, and that might even be a progressive tax. Who knows? So I would just say, when people come to vote on this, please leave the department to come together with some sensible suggestions for this, and people can vote yes or no when we come back to the Assembly, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Farnham.
So I urge caution to members, sir, when a minister says this is just a bit of exploratory work. Because actually, if it was a bit of exploratory work, he doesn't need the Assembly's permission to do it.
If you want to speak, Deputy Gores, then you should speak.
Yes, I'll give way.
In due course. If you want to make a speak, then it's not appropriate to interrupt another speaker.
Oh, I apologise for that, sir, but it is not correct what the deputy has just said. Currently, ministers are not able to do exploratory work, as the deputy knows, because of a previous decision by the Assembly. So ministers cannot even do exploratory work on this issue without a decision of the Assembly.
That's a very since when have previous decisions of this Assembly, sir, interrupted what the government want or don't want to do? But anyway, sir, I usually don't mind interjections from my good friend Deputy Gorse, but in retaliation, I'm going to read just a short paragraph from Deputy Mezek's report, which says, in 2016, the Ian Gorse-led austerity government considered multiple attempts to increase taxes, both directly and indirectly, on islanders to fill the black hole they had created in public finances. These attempts were all conceived, badly explained, and were proposed in direct contradiction to many of the election pledges made by government ministers to oppose raising taxes, sir. Now, I think there's a certain sense of déjà vu there, because if I was participated in the elections in 2022, those promises came flying out of most members. And actually, this waste disposal, liquid waste, solid waste, in my opinion, for what it's worth, should come out of general taxation and not be introduced by charges like this. The last Assembly, sir, sent the government away with a flea in its ear about this, and I'm surprised that this government has the audacity to bring it back. So this is a general taxation issue, and I ask members to remember that. So having said that, according to Deputy Binet and Deputy Gorse, this is just probably a gentle attempt. They just want to have a look at it to see what it's like. But I guarantee, hot on the acceptance of the Assembly with this particular amendment or proposal from them to look at it will shortly be followed, or in the next government plan, by a firm proposal to introduce these charges. But just on notice, I will be opposing this at every stage. I think it should be something that's taken account of in general taxation, and perhaps it's time to look at our general taxation rather than have a line of stealth charges. And before Reform Jersey get too excited, I'm not proposing we increase it, sir, but just actually prioritise more carefully, sir, give the right priority to these sort of things, to the infrastructure requirements that islanders need, rather than £80 million on cabinet offices and such forth, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. I strongly urge members to reject this amendment. To take up some of the points that have been raised, there's no skullduggery here, there's no hidden agendas. We are being completely upfront and honest about the need to have an honest conversation about how we raise money to pay for systematic underinvestment in vital resources. And we have suggested that we do that by considering something which until now has been banned for us to consider. And Deputy Farnham attempted to suggest that we are not constrained by that. I can absolutely tell this Assembly that we are constrained by the previous Assembly's decision. I have had briefings from officers to tell me what we can and can't do. That has been hammered home to us. We cannot do certain things. We cannot even ask officers to consider various things. It seems to me that was the amendment by Deputy then Senator, I think, Le Fondre. The Le Fondre Amendment, as it's generally known in government. Perhaps Deputy Mezek is after the Mezek Amendment, but it seems a strange form of political immortality to be searching for, to have amendments passed that attempt to stop people even considering ideas. Why not general taxation? Why not general taxation? For lots of reasons, but for one very good reason that is specific to this issue. The ability to impose charges allows us to consider how we might influence behaviour. In other words, it allows us to consider that we have a system with limited capacity and that we might want to incentivise behaviour that reduces the production of waste and reduces, in fact, the consumption of water, because that is ultimately what often generates a lot of waste. And that would be a good thing. That would be a mature and sensible thing for us to be considering, given our constrained resources, but it is currently not allowed. So, I think we've adopted this approach, and Deputy Binet has been very strong in pointing out that we should not attempt to use charges to be additional and attempt to substitute for taxation for the budget that is already used to pay for waste. This is additional money to pay for a known, proven need. So the Le Fondre Amendment had at least one benefit, one improvement over the amendment that we're considering, and that is clarity. It said that we could not have any discussions about certain types of waste charges. The amendment that we're considering does not have the benefit of that clarity. It says that we should not discuss anything that is regressive. The problem is that regressive is a sliding scale. And we need to think about how this would actually work in practice. Let's look at one of the things that was briefly touched upon in Deputy Binet's speech, compensatory measures. A tax may appear, or a charge may appear regressive, but it might be compensated for by other measures somewhere else in a budget. Would that not be allowed? Because, in fact, it wouldn't be allowed, I think, according to this, but I don't know. How will officers and indeed ministers know when they are crossing the regressive line? A regressive tax might be considered a flat rate tax, but we might have bandings. What if it was, let's say, 3 bands? 3 bands. Well, that's not totally regressive, but it's not as good as 5 bands or 10 bands. So which one would we be allowed to consider? I imagine we might need to get on the phone to Deputy Mezek and ask him, does this pass the regressive threshold or not? And of course, Deputy Mezek may say, well, no. So we'd all trot back and try and come up with something that did pass the relevant threshold. So the central point here is that really, when we face a major issue like this, we should not start off with a restraint, with a refusal to even consider something. We don't know what the precise definition of regressive is. There are multiple options which maybe partly have regressive elements. They may be compensated for elsewhere. There may be many different versions of these things. They may be designed to do things like manipulate or encourage various types of behaviours which would be beneficial. All of these things should be considered in the round, and then they will be brought back to the Assembly for everyone's consideration. Deputy Mezek says we shouldn't waste our time on items that are regressive, but it might be turned down even if they're not regressive. That's the nature of bringing propositions to the Assembly. You do the work, you present a case, and it falls or stands. It wouldn't be wasting time. We need to have a free hand to consider all the different possibilities when we look at waste charges, and I am sure that this Assembly will take a balanced view when those decisions come back. And if we have done something that is so blatantly unfair, that falls foul of basic principles of fairness and equity, then this Assembly will make it very, very clear to us. But please don't waste our time, Deputy Mezek says. No, We probably won't do that though, will we? Because we're not entirely stupid. So we will bring forward proposals that are measured and proportionate. But if the Assembly takes a different view, then obviously we will need to reflect on that. We might even ask the Assembly members' advice and have some discussions and some meetings and to talk about it with scrutiny. Who knows? So I urge members to reject this amendment. Let us be free to consider all the options in all their various permutations and let the Assembly decide at the appropriate time when we have all the information in front of us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on this amendment? Accordingly, I call upon Deputy Tarbleson.
Thank you, sir. So I think I have a pretty good track record of opposing waste charges because members who are in the Assembly, as I know Deputy Mesic was, in 2016-17, know that I and the parish of St Helier struggled to remind the States Assembly that a promise had been made to the parish in the 1950s that parishioners would never have to pay for waste. And that went as far as an appeal, but was defeated, partly due to the excellent work of my good friend, the Attorney General, who may have been the Solicitor General at the day, I'm not sure. Anyway, that was an expensive defeat for the parish. We lost that argument. And since then, I've been waiting, really, for government to come back and say, right, now that we can charge for waste disposal, we need to start thinking about it. A lot has happened in that time. I mean, obviously, recently, I've become a member of the Council of Ministers, which I'm pleased I wasn't back then. But also what's happened in that time, and I want to allude to our sister island in my speech in two different ways. First of all, Guernsey has taken an ambitious trailblazing step with waste disposal and almost without much resistance introduced an extraordinarily ambitious and tough new approach to recycling, introducing a whole suite of waste charges, payment per bag of waste and this kind of thing, but with an exceptionally good recycling offer that goes right across the states of Guernsey. And I've been able to see that in place when we were there for the Crown Dependencies Network a couple of years ago. Guernsey have really, they are the trailblazers in terms of waste charging and in terms of recycling. Their recycling rate is way up in the 70% mark. And of course, one of the principles about that is that everybody in Guernsey has to accept that they're going to pay for polluting. Polluter pays works in Guernsey. And that applies to the less well-off as well as the well-off. Because everybody in Guernsey appears to accept with remarkable ease that they all have to play a part in tackling the problem they had, not having an incinerator, having voted, I think wisely, against building an incinerator. They had to accept that landfill was no longer an option. Therefore, they were going to all together face the need to reduce their waste. And they're doing a great job, and I commend them for it. Whether I'm going to commend our sister island so much for their recent debates about paying for things is another matter. What we've seen, as far as I can tell, in the states of deliberation in Guernsey is a refusal to accept that certain bills have to be paid, and a refusal to look at any way of doing that. And that's perhaps why they're in the state they are at the moment. It is, I think, tomorrow that their vote of no confidence proceeds in the top committee there. And it does seem to me that there's probably not much comparison to be made in that second example with our sister island, but I do take the point being made by ministers that if they can't consider waste charging, if their hands are to be tied and they can't consider allowing everybody to tackle this, then we're not going to get a good outcome. We may not get a good outcome. We've already had assurance, and it's obvious, I think, that any charges are not going to come in without a states debate anyway. So are we really saying to the Minister for Infrastructure, go away and look at waste charging, but don't look at certain things? I think that is tying his hands. I think I would much rather let the department do the work. I urge them to look very carefully at what Guernsey have done, because as I say, I think they're a shining example of how a small island can cope with its waste problems. For that reason, I will not be supporting the amendment, and I will be supporting the Council of Ministers. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to refer to, obviously, the 2016 proposition, which I wasn't around for debating, but it is a very strange matter for the States Assembly to effectively, despite all the democratic principles that we espouse, to actually say you cannot, as a government, whoever the government is, cannot look at a particular matter. I just find that incredibly anti-democratic. I find it a really strange position to take. And it's the next step from there, Deputy Mezek's amendment here, is again saying you cannot look at these things. And I know Deputy Mezek is a Democrat, and so I find it quite odd that he would prefer to stop work and to stop a government coming up or doing any thinking. It's not even coming up with a proposal, just doing any thinking, rather than allowing that thinking in the normal democratic manner to take place, then various propositions to come forward, and then have the argument about those propositions in the proper democratic manner here in the Assembly. And obviously, if say, any proposition that did come forward was deeply regressive, I would absolutely expect Deputy Mezek to be pointing that out and to be arguing passionately about the regressive nature of that and trying to turn the Assembly against those propositions if that was the case. So for me, this isn't so much about waste charges in themselves. This is much more about democracy and what we are as an Assembly and what we allow ourselves to do, which I would like to think is think widely, think of what is best for the island, regardless of what that may entail, and then bring proposition to this Assembly to be deliberated on here. And so therefore, I do urge members to reject Deputy Mezek's amendment, but in itself, rejecting that amendment does not mean, it does not tie members' hands in any way to rejecting any future proposals that may come forward because they are regressive. That would be perfectly valid, but that's the democratic way to do it. This, tying hands in advance, it has nothing, in my view, to do with democracy. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Jones.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to add for members' understanding, we're talking about one side of waste charging. There's, of course, the other side, which is trying to reduce as much waste that's being produced in the first place. And as part of the carbon neutral roadmap, there will be work that will start and commence next year on the circular economy strategy, something that already we have been working on, and officers have been working on through EcoActive, to try to educate islanders about the waste hierarchy, as we call it, where the first point on the waste hierarchy is to reduce your waste to begin with before starting to recycle and then dispose of. And so that is really important when at the moment, this proposition, of course, is talking about charges, but there is that other side where we will be looking at this circular economy strategy to try to help islanders as a whole, both businesses and individuals, to try to reduce the overall waste that will be produced on the island, to be having that circular economy by reusing before and recycling before disposing of, which will hopefully reduce those overall charges that may or may not happen with the exploratory work that will happen, which is hopefully happen as well. So I wanted to give that other side as well, that it's not just one side. There is actually a whole host of work that will be commencing next year as well on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Conatable St Mary.
Thank you, sir. And simply to say, it's perhaps worth recording that there was previously a proposition to introduce waste charges, which foundered at the time of the debate. I happened to be chair of the Environment Scrutiny Panel at the time, and it foundered mainly because what was then the TTS Minister, having been given the authority in the MTFP to introduce waste charges, felt there was no need to go out to consultation. It was that lack of consultation which prevented it going any further. And it's on I recall that we had started the debate, and on the second warning, it was withdrawn for that reason, because the council ministers realised their mistake. It would therefore be odd if we got so far down the line with a further proposition that consultation was in fact stymied at the outset, because again it would run the risk of proceeding, run the risk of not proceeding. So I support the council ministers in opposing this amendment for that reason, sir.
Thank you, Conor. Does any other wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Hayes.
Thank you, sir. So the charters of James I and Charles II in 1627, Charles II in 1688, confirm rights and privileges on Jersey to levy our own rates of duty and taxes. But we have here a situation where we have those rights and privileges as an assembly, but the government who serves this assembly is not able to look at the wider issue of charges. I have been known, sir, to say if it quacks and it waddles, it's a duck. And some charges are taxes, and some are really recovery of government expenses that are incurred by the government in order to run those services. The Constable of St Helier comments are absolutely correct in the issue of waste. And I would say, and I would correct, if I may say, Deputy Mezek, who suggests that the Gorst government was an austerity government. No, it was not an austerity government. Government spending actually rose. What happened is that there was money moved from areas that required, that could be having savings in, largely put into health services at the time, as I recall, but maybe the Treasury Minister will correct me. The government has a responsibility, sir, and this Assembly has a responsibility to set a range of duties and charges in a manner which is likely to be conducive towards economic growth, as well as looking after the interests of individual householders. It is not a binary matter, and Deputy Farnham, in opposing the Council of Ministers' amendment, says we should look at general taxation. Well, what does he mean by general taxation, sir? Is it actually a consumption tax? Is it an income tax? Is it a business tax? Or is it something that looks like a tax? Or is it actually a proper... the Council of Ministers is quite right when Deputy Gorst said, that, and the Constable of St Mary's have said, the Council of Ministers is unable to look at recovery of monies that should be perhaps given consideration of being run by, paid for by businesses who do enjoy a low level of taxation. Rates, for example, in the UK are 80% of rent roll. Here they're about 4%. We need to maybe talk to the Committee of Constables about business rates in future. We do need to have an issue where today we have some real issues in terms of problems with infrastructure, and the Infrastructure Minister is quite right. The Environment Minister was quite right. There are issues in terms of the management of liquid waste and solid waste, which needs a range of government interventions, some of which will be charges to avoid for example, waste arisings that otherwise could be recycled. Other issues in terms of liquid waste is a service that is provided at the moment by general taxation, but it can't be invested in any long-term way because of the way it's structured at the moment in terms of raising charges. And there is a discussion to be had about how we fund long-term infrastructure costs through a range of taxation of the charges. But the Council of Ministers can't even have that discussion. We can't even have a discussion about whether a charge could be brought in or not. It makes no sense. In an island, sir, that has the rights and privileges to set its taxation and duties, the rights of the government should be also extended to having a range of other charges when there is a case to do so. And there could be a case to do so, but we can't even have the discussion about it because of the Le Fondre amendment. So when the facts change, I change my mind. And the facts are clear that the Infrastructure Minister needs investment in liquid waste because he needs to have that in order for the Environment Minister to consider, with the planning responsibilities, appropriate planning matters so that we can build houses in the right places. At the moment, the government has a situation from a result of the last island plan where you can't have houses because we can't have the waste connections because there's no wastewater collections. That must say to members there's something wrong. We need to find acceptable, proportionate and fair, and I won't say the word progressives, I'm being encouraged to make an additional word, sir. We must have a range of interventions, which means a range of taxes and charges that are sensible for today and the economy of the future. And the economy of the future will always be, I would suggest respectfully to members, an island of low taxation, because that's one of the been one of the issues that we can actually advance in Jersey's interest, and that's why we enjoy such a good trade in services business today and tomorrow. Taxation is complicated. It's not just general taxation, I say to Deputy Farnham. It is a range of charges and duties and others. And that discussion cannot be had at the moment because of the Le Fondre amendment, which this amendment seeks to overturn in order to have that conversation. But I would assure members of one thing, that they have the ultimate say. They have the ultimate say because we have the privilege as a State Assembly of making our own taxation and charges decisions ourselves. But there's a problem that we can't actually even have a bit of that conversation because of the underlying issue that this amendment seeks to achieve. I would hope members are reasonable. I would hope that they're pragmatic, and I hope that there is a sense that we have to find solutions which are proper. And yes, it's quite right to look at the issues of Guernsey and to reflect on. I take no pleasure in looking at the issues in Guernsey, but one of them may or may not be the fact that they didn't consider a consumption tax and a GST. I don't say it's a requirement of theirs, but if you don't balance your books, and you can't balance your books, then you have political instability. We don't have political instability in Jersey, sir. I think we have a pragmatic and proper assembly that will consider the right decisions, but they need to be given those options by way of a proposition to a charge, which can't currently be done, and that debate should be had, and this amendment would allow that to happen, and not to shackle the Council of Ministers that are here to serve the Assembly in a proper way and give members options about the right things for the future. We need this underlying issue to be solved so that we can come back with proper proportionate arrangements that are fair to islanders and will be conducive to economic growth and all those other important issues. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Taddeo.
Thank you, sir. First of all, can I say welcome back to Deputy Joseph in the fullest sense of the word, because he is back. I think we're getting the old school Deputy Joseph, who's even taken us back to the 1600s with the Charter of King James I. Can I say I'm a bit baffled as to what that's got to do with this particular debate? Apart from the fact we know in Jersey they didn't even have sewers until the mid-1800s. And of course someone had to pay for that, and interestingly enough it was the Constable of St Helier, not the current one, but the Pierre Le Sueur, who introduced sewers to Jersey at a time when there was a cholera pandemic, and he's quite fittingly got a needle, or rather the obelisk at Broad Street in his memory. But the point is, none of this debate here today about whether or not the future taxes or charges to do with liquid waste are regressive or not takes away any of those charters that were conveyed and the privileges that were conveyed on the island of Jersey. Indeed, Deputy Mezek is exercising his right to bring an amendment effectively to a budget, and the Assembly is now exercising its right now to decide on whether any future taxes should be regressive or not. And I'm a bit surprised. I mean, I don't mind being called naive. Maybe it's a bit naive of me to think that this should be in any way controversial. Why would we want to send the government away to look at regressive charges? But that certainly, I wouldn't want to do that. And if I was a minister, I would welcome the steer from the Assembly to say that actually, yeah, by all means, go away and look at future charges, look at future taxes. And we're not saying that they can't be tax neutral. We're not saying that they have to be progressive. We're just saying that they either have to be progressive or neutral, and we just don't want them to be regressive. And when I hear the Environment Minister, who is also good value, the Planning and Environment Minister is very erudite, and he can turn his hand to any speech and any position that the Council of Ministers takes to defend or to promote. He does remind me a little bit of the Lewis Carroll character, Humpty Dumpty. Only in his words, not in his physique, I hasten to add. When Humpty Dumpty says, you know, when I use a word, it means just what I choose it to mean, nothing more and nothing less. And of course, he's saying, well, regressive can mean different things to different people. I think I heard him right. I was outside the assembly, but listening on the old parlour phone downstairs. And he's saying, well, why would we want to tie my hands? I need to bring something back. And regressive can mean different things to different people. Well, it doesn't. We know what regressive means. It means that it impacts those who are least able to pay the most. That's what regressive taxation is. It's not a new concept. And anyone in the Assembly who's not familiar with that is probably in the wrong job, certainly if they're in government. So I don't see why this is so controversial. I understand maybe that there's a rational argument to say that there should be user pays charges. Now, we know that in many jurisdictions, many systems, that the water system and the sewage system are linked. I think I've said this before. I'm getting déjà vu, or déjà entendu is maybe the better phrase. And that usually government takes care of the whole thing, or it outsources water and sewage to a private supplier or an arm's length, who then puts in a charge. So this is actually when we need to be having the debate about whether we want that to be regressive. So let's not say this debate is going to happen sometime in the future. Deputy Mezek has lodged an amendment saying that we shouldn't have regressive charges. So if you have any thoughts about whether water charges should be regressive or not, members need to be putting them on the record now. So that's what I will do. And I will say that I've already been quite uncomfortable with the fact that the water metering was brought in, I think, under the radar. And what that means is you might say that's just rational. That's surely fair, isn't it? It's fair that you pay for what you use. But of course, and I'd welcome to the thoughts of the Assistant Minister for Education, who we know likes to speak on children's issues. Because if you have a large family with 3, 4, 5 children, you will necessarily use more water, I would suspect, if you want to maintain basic standards of hygiene, whether that's to do with bathing, to do with cooking, to do with washing the dishes. You will necessarily use more water, and you will necessarily produce more wastewater as a result. And therefore, if in addition we're going to bring in a waste charge, which potentially looks at how much water comes out of your waste water pipes, you will be paying more if we allow for regressive taxation, regressive charging to happen. Because that's what we already do with the water system. And if we go down the route and say to the Minister, we're quite happy for you to pursue a regressive methodology, which he will, no doubt, want to look at. That's what he's saying. He wants to look at ways that are regressive and that harm those who are least able to pay the most. He's going to come back with a whole load of options, which we as an Assembly then have to look through. And then we have to have this debate again as to say, well, why did you go down that avenue in the first place? Oh, it's because you told me that you wanted me to look at regressive charges. So what we're saying today is that if we don't accept this amendment by Deputy Mezek, which I think is obvious and any right-thinking person should accept and adopt that, we're saying to the Minister, please go away and look at regressive charges and taxes to find a way to bring that back to the Assembly. And then, of course, we're just going to have this debate again, whether it's in a year, 2 years, 3 years, or in a future Assembly. There will be lots of options there for regressive taxation. I don't want any part of that. I want to expedite the system and the methodology that the Minister, the Assistant Minister goes through to make sure that, and we know this is a wider issue, isn't it? Because at the moment it's about water. In the future it will be about climate change. It will be about climate taxes. And I do very much look to the Assistant Minister behind me, because when those new taxes in, if there's already a methodology and a track record of imposing regressive taxation on a population who are already finding it difficult, the cost of living difficult, because those at the top can absorb the costs. You know, they don't mind if a new charge is introduced. But it's the majority of those who can't afford it, and that's what we're asking in this very simple amendment, is to not consider regressive taxes in future. Please come back with charges or taxes if you must. Make sure they're tax neutral, or that they're possibly, radical idea, even progressive in nature.
Thank you. Deputy Conatable of St John.
Thank you, sir. So I was reminded by Deputy Johnson about the 2017 plans, because at that time, I was the chair of the Chamber of Commerce, Transport and Tourism Committee, and we felt that the plans were very ill thought through. Sir, Deputy Binet spoke about the underinvestment in drains. There's a clear need. In 2023, we've got far too many houses, areas that are not connected to drains, areas that would shock people when they saw the location. We're unable to build houses because we don't have drains, and we don't invest in the drains that we've got. So that plan in 2017 was targeting commercial businesses, and yet a lot of households would have actually used far more water than some of those businesses that have been targeted. So I believe any review that is undertaken should look at everything possible. So we're currently looking at a budget of £1.3 billion. So our priorities are totally wrong, sir, in my opinion. We should be able to provide basic infrastructure from the money we currently raise. It is totally wrong that we don't have a good recycling. My colleague behind me spoke about the Guernsey recycling. Sir, St John's introduced recycling in 2006. Sir, it's still not adopted across the island. We have to do far better to reduce our waste, to ensure that we provide the services, basic services. I am pleased to see the increase in water and sewer extensions in this budget, but we've got to do far more, sir, and we shouldn't restrict ourselves where we look to get that revenue, but I would look where we've currently got it in our existing income. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conatar. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? Yes, Conatar, Austin Ballard, Deputy Lord.
Thank you, sir. I would just like to contain myself to a solid waste issue, and particularly highlight the costs of the local curbside collections, which all parishes deal with. At the moment, sir, those collections are taken down to La Collette and received by the department. The parishioners, through their rate, pay for the actual collection. What I would flag up, sir, we don't anticipate receiving a charge from infrastructure to take that waste. We're already dealing with it. And it has been mentioned before, and I suggest, sir, that would be a regressive tax in that all households would be hit. Notwithstanding that, sir, I think everybody has to look after their own waste, and perhaps the department might consider focusing rather more on how people have disposed of their own waste and making that easier. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Council of Ministers for getting their act in order. It's good to see that they can really get together when it comes to the introduction of regressive taxes into the future. That's a clear principle. It's focused. It's got a really good, what's the phrase? I can't remember what the phrase is now. Relentless focus. That's the phrase. Thank you, thank you, Deputy Sir. A relentless focus in ensuring that we enable government officers, very important, the role of officers, because officers will inform you on what you should be doing. Very important that we enable them to come up with regressive taxes in the future. That's really important, so well done, Council of Ministers. And it's good to see so many principles in the Assembly. I see this Deputy Constable St Helier, sir, really strong principle about St Helier not being charged for waste. But don't worry, because there's another set of principles there as well now, as part of Council of Ministers. Good to see you part of that Council of Ministers. So I'd like to see congratulations to the Constable St Helier putting real transparency and how those principles now change for the people of St Helier. We have regressive tax, we have water meters. Water meters look at how much water each individual household uses and pays, and they are regressive because if you have a large family, you will pay more. If you are not wealthy enough, or you live in in accommodation that you rent that does not have efficient water system, for example, or may have waste, then you will pay for it, and you might not be able to do anything with it. It's a nice world that we can all live in, to say we can look at every single piece of waste that we have, but if you haven't got your own bin and you're going to share one in a house of 5 or 6 flats or rooms, then that's much more difficult to do. And how we're going to account for that, I don't know. And regressive taxes punishes. Now, so the question is, the argument would be, but we're not looking at these taxes. We're not, honestly not, it's okay. And the question was, there's no hidden agendas. But that, sir, it has to be coupled with the very opening speech from the Minister for Infrastructure, trying to get the ministerial names right, sir. He said, we might even have a progressive tax. Now let's think about that. So in psychology, there's this thing called paralinguistics, the vocal features that accompany speech. It's really important because I could say, sir, I could say to you, no. Or I could say, oh, no. And they have very different meanings with the same word. And I think it's very important, the tonation that comes with these sentences that are used in this assembly. We might even have a progressive tax. We might even have a progressive tax. We might even have a progressive tax. Now that suggests to me that a progressive tax is somewhere down the line. And what we're looking at is, let's remove that democratic control that said there are some principles in this assembly. There are some principles that we have. We've got another, some have other sets of principles in fit in wherever. I want to also say to, well, I'll say that at the end. Let's remove that democratic principle that we say that we're not going to just have raft after raft of regressive taxes, particularly when it comes to waste disposal for people on this island and businesses. And yes, of course, we have to address recycling and the amount that we use. We have to look at the amount of energy we use. We have to look at the way we insulate our homes. We're not doing any of those things effectively because we're just not going down that line. And the reason is this, sir, is because the simple fallback position and the principled position of the Council of Ministers and this government is we can always fall back on a nice regressive tax because those it affects most will not be the people who are out there voting as much as everyone else, and they probably won't have the control because those who speak up in this assembly against that are currently in the minority. And that's where we are. And that's one of the issues that we face, sir. I would like to say, though, sir, to the Environment Minister, and I honestly mean this, I actually don't like it when he stood up and said he's not entirely stupid. Now, I could be facetious and stand up, yeah, not entirely. But what I would like to say is I don't see the Minister as stupid at all. He's an intelligent man. There are intelligent people throughout this assembly, and we need to stop doing ourselves down. This isn't about some sort of personality clash, which keeps coming up. And I've got to say that every time somebody... It does seem that those personality attacks are on the increase, particularly for us from Informed, but there you go, just listen to the argument instead. I don't see him as stupid at all. What I see as a principle that is misguided, and we need to talk about that principle, and we need to accept that that's misguided. So there's the notion of outsourcing, and this is the concern, and this is why we need to keep this check and balance in place at the moment. Because what we've got is an increasing narrative of we have huge investment is needed, huge investment in the sewage system, etc., etc. Okay? But we can't really afford it. And so what are we going to do? Well, we're going to do it because we want more homes on the sewage system, otherwise we can't build homes. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then the principle behind it is we don't have the money from central government. We can't do that because we have a huge hospital to build to begin with. We don't know how much that's going to cost. But there you go. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Let's not talk about bridges. But we might end up with one of those, sir. Perhaps if we could connect it up to us. Anyway, move on. We move to Guernsey and send our waste there. Build a pipe. We're coming up with some ideas, sir. There we go. Council of Ministers, great idea. I've lost my own track now. Well, I was going to make a point about, oh yes, of course. We get to the huge cost and then we outsource that cost. And as soon as we outsource that cost, we lose control of that cost. And then inevitably it becomes a regressive tax with different drivers. The drivers are not about the well-being or the fairness for our people. It's about, I had this cost as a company, I must take this cost back, therefore this tax is the one that fits that most effectively, therefore it will happen. And that's why we have to put the check and balance against regressive taxes in place now in this assembly, rather than leaving it to have this gradual acceptance of that change, which is what happens. And that is the worry, and that is why this proposition, this amendment, sorry, is way more important than we recognise. That if we allow this to be cut loose now, we will come back here in 3, 4, 5 years' time and we will be introducing waste charges for individuals on this island at a time when there are charges everywhere else. And the government would have lost its responsibility. The reality for people on this island is they have these charges everywhere, from their water charges to GP charges to these small charges, GST, these regressive taxes that build up and build up and build up. And they're annoyance if you're quite well off and I just don't want to pay this extra, although I can afford it. But they're much more than that if you are struggling, and more people on this island are struggling. That's the reality. So we had a quote from, I don't know when it was in history. I'm a great fan of, I think it's Susie Dent, I keep getting her name wrong. Arthur Dent, that's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, who's a wordsmith, and she tweets every day, or X's, I don't know what you call it now, the word of the day. And today's is, I think it's called Bayardism. It's a 17th century word. And it's a confidence that is rooted in ignorance or willful understanding of reality. And I think we need to be really careful of that the reality of people's lives day to day and these extra charges that can be imposed may seem small, but when you build them up together, we end up with a sort of gestalt charge where the sum is more than the total of the parts because of the impact it has on those individuals. So I would say be very, very wary of voting against this, because we'll come back in a few years' time, probably not me, someone will come back and hold this assembly to account for the decision that was made today that lets loose the move to regressive charges for such an essential part of what we have every single day on this island. I urge you to vote for this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Dottie Miller.
Thank you, sir. The first thing I would say is I don't think I've heard anywhere from anyone in government that we are going to bring in regressive charging. It is very much a matter of considering options, and nobody is going to plan is starting with a blank sheet of paper that says, let's draw up a regressive tax. As Constable St John has said, there is no question that we need investment. I support the principle of some charging for waste management. It's clear that we need that. I was approached by a constituent some months ago who was outraged that his septic tank, he wasn't on mains drains, his septic tank was broken, and he had identified the closest mains drain and asked to be connected to it. And the answer he was given was that he couldn't connect to it because it was full. It just simply didn't have any more capacity, and that connecting more houses to it would cause possible sewage and water courses and all sorts of environmental damage. So it's very clear to me that we need to look at investment in mains drains. The reason I also support charging is that my experience of it is that it is pathetically poor. I also don't have mains drains. An advantage or disadvantage, you may say, of living in Trinity or some of the other northern parishes that don't have mains drains. It would appear that I own a septic tank, even though the septic tank is situated in another person's field and it supports another 2 properties. I appear to have the ownership of it. And I have responsibility, therefore, periodically, at least once a year, of having it emptied. If I get organised and empty it earlier, sometimes it doesn't need very much emptying and it only takes 1 tank, which means you pay nothing. Other years, and I do blame my neighbours' over-enthusiasm for power washing. I hope they're not listening. Sometimes it takes 2 tanks. If you do need 2 tanks, this year it cost £33. Now that is the cost for mains, for waste clearance for 3 households, all of which are under-occupied, I accept, but £33 cannot come close to meeting the government's cost of sending 2 tankers with people to empty the tanks and take it away and drain it. It just can't. So we need to look at, I don't mind user pays, I don't mind user pay charges, and I don't mind paying more than £33 to have that tank cleared. But we do have to think about how we invest into infrastructure. Excuse me, haven't had any tea this morning, how we invest into infrastructure and how we raise funds to do that. But nobody is planning on regressive charging? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member to speak on this amendment? Deputy Luce.
Thank you, sir. I will be brief. Members have spoken about main drains, and I want to put them on notice that my scrutiny panel will very shortly be publishing a review that we've taken some time to do over the situation, and members are quite right. There are areas of this island that you would consider to be mainstream, and yet applicants are putting in requests to join the main drain system and being told it's at capacity. In the middle of the island, in the middle of Trinity, if you like, there are people being told you cannot join. Work has to be done across the whole island to make sure that we can continue to build houses for people to live in, because at the moment, the ageing main drain system is a problem. I just want to talk briefly about solid waste. We're trying in this age to get people to produce less waste, but we really need to look at systems which penalise, if you like, businesses who produce vast amount of waste. And they don't pay any more than a business that's really good and creates less problems for us and for government. We need to look at that. Curbside recycling's been mentioned. I think I'm right, I'm looking at my constable, but I think I'm right in saying we couldn't get anybody to tender to do curbside recycling in St Martin's recently. That needs to be looked at. We need to be thinking about where we go in the future. We've got an energy from waste plant which is halfway through its useful life. The decision on where we go next needs to be taken really soon when you think about how long it took to get a decision to build that plant at the college. And then we've heard about water meters. Well, they may be regressive, but they certainly saved a huge amount of water which is going to be a really important resource in the coming years. The meter itself is an absolute necessity, and the way we use that meter might be the way forward for the Reform Party. So what I wanted to say with that is the meter was a policy, if you like, that needs to be modified in the way it's used. And I say to members, please don't tie the minister's hands with this amendment, because what he could do is look at these regressive taxes and modify them. Get them modified so that they can be used for best for everybody in the future. But I've given a very short list of issues there he faces. There's many, many more. He doesn't have enough money to do everything. He's going to have to come up with some solutions, and I just say to members, please don't tie his hands at this early stage. Every decision he makes will have to come back to this Assembly. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Gorst.
So I'm loath to stand bearing in mind the time and what the previous speaker has just said. I take it with a light-hearted pinch of salt when people refer to the Gorst-led austerity government, particularly when there was a member referring to it negatively who was a member of that government. But anyway, that's politics. The important point, I think, is to go back, is to...
Just a point of clarifications. If
you're prepared to give way.
Well, so I was wondering if he was referring to Deputy Mezek. No, it's Lisa.
I think probably is.
I wanted to reiterate what the Minister for Infrastructure said in his initial response about the cautious, careful approach that he is taking to this, together with his colleague, the Environment Minister. And I absolutely believe that they are taking a cautious, careful approach. They're very mindful of what has happened previously, but they are equally mindful, as the Assistant Chief Minister said, in heaping praise upon how Guernsey are dealing with their waste in an appropriate manner. And it would be wrong of us to tie the hands of the Minister as he does his thinking, which he's not able to do now without this change, as he does his thinking, because he wants to be able to learn from best international practice, be that in Guernsey or be that somewhere else across the globe, because that investment is needed. Some of it, as the Constable of St John says, can be taken from existing funding. Some of it may require additional funding. And the whole purpose of the wording as drafted in the government plan currently is that he can do that work, he can engage with his scrutiny panel, as we've just heard, is very willing to do. The problem with the amendment that Deputy Mezet brings forward is that it inadvertently and unintentionally may tie off some proposals which are positive, which the mover of this amendment would actually support. And therefore, I would urge members to reject the amendment for all the reasons that others have said. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on this amendment? I call upon Deputy Mezek to reply.
Thank you, sir, and I thank members who contributed to this debate. There's actually one really good argument against my amendment that I'm surprised to have not heard from any member. And that argument, sir, is that a regressive tax is the right thing to do because it will be the most efficient and practical way of raising revenue for this. And nobody has had the guts to make that argument. Instead, they say, oh, no, we don't like regressive taxation, but don't vote to rule it out. Well, if not now, when? They're asking to dedicate time and resources to something that they either don't have the guts to say they support or don't support, in which case they're asking members to waste time and money. And neither of those positions, frankly, are legitimate on this. So to be clear, when some members have taken offence at my referring to a previous government as an austerity government, and Deputy Ozofu obviously doesn't have a correct definition of austerity if he thinks that it simply means absolute reductions in terms of budgets, because that's not what it means, but we'll come on to definitions later. So it was an austerity government because it took certain elements of government spending to find savings from that inflicted harm on some of the most vulnerable people in our society. That included £10 million cuts to the social security budget targeted at single-parent households, at pensioners, people with disabilities. It was a shameful episode in Jersey's political history and ought never to be repeated, and the architects of it should have it brought back to them every time possible in the hope that they may learn the lessons from it, sir. But what that government also did, sir, is it attempted on 2 occasions to fill the financial black hole that had been created by the previous Treasury Minister by introducing stealth taxes like a waste disposal charge, albeit not to domestic households, which was defeated in this assembly because it was badly thought through, badly consulted on, and would have had a harmful impact on those businesses. And some of them appear to have learnt no lessons from that exercise at all, and instead want to dedicate time and resources to looking at other mechanisms which may suffer the exact same fate. So they also proposed introducing a health tax, which would have been capped to exempt the super wealthy from paying the full rate of it. Another regressive tax. And so these definitions are not difficult to deal with, and it was astounding listening to Deputy Renouf, who he had this idea of if there were different bands to the charge, if there was a 3-band version or a 5-band version, would you be prohibited from looking at the 3-band option, and perhaps they'd have to call me to ask. So the definition is clear. The definition of a regressive tax is a tax where the effective rate increases as the taxable base decreases. Unless the rates decrease as those bands go up, of course you wouldn't be prohibited from looking at them, and that's absolutely clear in the proposition, and those attempts to muddy the waters, I think, are wrong. In fact, sir, that same deputy spoke about, and I made a note of the words, being upfront and honest. And that's exactly the point of this amendment. It's about us saying to one another in this assembly, as the body that will have to make the decision one way or the other at the end of it, and to the public, these are the things that we're not prepared to tolerate because we think they're wrong. So Deputy Morell spoke about democracy. What is undemocratic about an elected chamber saying, we don't want this to happen, so please don't waste your time on it? It's what happened in 2016, that a prohibition was put on the government from investigating those kinds of domestic waste charges. And now this government, wanting to increase charges on the public and on businesses, despite their statements that they don't want to raise taxes, that government actually wanting to increase taxes and charges, has lodged a government which has Part B on it to lift that prohibition, and the Assembly will decide one way or the other. That's a perfectly democratic process, just as it's democratic to say here and now, okay, if you want to go down that road, don't waste your time with iterations of taxes and charges which are going to harm the households and businesses that we say we want to stand up for, because it will suffer the same fate if it comes back to this Assembly as previous ones. You should exclusively use your time and resources on measures that will be more palatable to this Assembly. But sir, instead, they actually want to say to us, let us waste time looking at measures that some of those same ministers say, oh, of course we're not going to do. It's complete cognitive dissonance. Deputy Binet spoke about that there's no monopoly on care for vulnerable and businesses, which of course is right, but there's such a thing as a voting record, and you can't keep hammering people with a voting record that seems to be at odds with that principle. And I'm offering members that opportunity to say, if you don't want those restaurants, those bars, those hotels that may not be in the best of times, that may not be making loads and loads of profit, to say to them here and now, don't worry about a massive regressive charge being put on you in the future. At this moment in time, we're going to rule that out. And instead, they're going to have to look at something fairer and more progressive. It's about saying to households now who may be struggling with the cost of living, don't worry, we're not going to hammer you with a charge that you can't afford. We'll come up with a better mechanism. And so this idea that Deputy Binet raised about, we may impose this charge, but we'll just increase income support to counteract it. Is that really the most creative thing they can do? It's to give with one hand but take from the other and create a greater dependency on the welfare system, which Deputy Ward's scrutiny panel has already showed has many problems with it and the practical way that it delivers its services. I don't think that's the right thing to do, and we can do much better than that. So, sir, there is nothing anti-democratic about making a decision today that we don't want to give any kind of credence to the idea that we'll introduce a regressive tax, but we'll give the government the freedom that it's asking for to look at proportionate and progressive measures, which many of those members of government say that's exclusively what they'd be prepared to tolerate anyway. So this is about saving time and money, and it's about saying to those households and businesses, don't worry, we're not going to have that dark cloud hanging over you for longer and allowing you to fear, you to maybe even hold back on investing in your business, in your restaurant or your bar or what have you, because you're worried about the cost of businesses going up by an unfair regressive charge put forward by the government. Let's get to that point sooner rather than later. And sir, I just want to give a special shout out to my constable, sir, for his wonderful speech where he started by extolling his previous reputation as someone who opposed waste charges, and then gave a speech which left that reputation in tatters by the end of it. It is amazing how you see these transformations in these debates sometimes, sir. But I think I've been pretty clear all along that I'm against regressive taxation, and I will never make an apology for bringing propositions to this Assembly to try to get that principle adopted. That's about being upfront and honest, as Deputy Reniff asks for us. And so, sir, I make the proposition and the amendment and ask for the appel.
The appel has been called for. I invite members to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have had the chance to cast their votes. Councillor Greffier to close the voting. I can announce that the amendment has been rejected. 16 votes pour, 31 votes contre, and 1 abstention.
Have we the 16 and the 1, please, sir?
Yes.
Those voting for the Conotabs of St Martin, Grouville and St One, Deputy Southern, Tadier, Ward, Alves, Farnham, Mesick, Coles, Porray, Curtis, Feltham, Kovac and Dublé, Deputy Andrews as well, and Deputy Scott abstained.
Propose the adjournment, please, sir.
Adjournment is proposed. Are members content to adjourn now? The Assembly is adjourned until 2:15.